coronavirus infection. It has been very, very unfortunate to lose someone as tall as him in this journey. Let us all pay tributes to Comrade T. Peter. I hope you can all see the message, a tribute message for him on your screens. Comrade T. Peter, General Secretary of the National Fishworkers Forum. He left us way too early in an untimely departure uh, in the month of October, on 8th of October 2020, succumbing to his pneumonia infection that developed as part of his COVID. He was in the struggle path. He was one of the most militant community leaders from the fisheries sector India has given birth to. Someone who we have all very closely associated with and have seen always with a smiling face. Thank you, Peter, for being there with us all this while, and thank you for continuing to be with us. He was part of the Sri Lanka Tribunal. He spoke fiercely at the Sri Lanka Tribunal and spoke about what the international framework of blue economy is and how it will have a serious impact on the fishers' lives across South Asia. We thank him for the guidance that he did for us, and we hope his spirit may continue to be with the fishers movement all over the world. Thank you all very much once again for joining us. May I quickly go into introducing the two women who I would like to invite here to do the formal welcome to all, but also give us a certain context to today's meeting. And both of them have been very, very instrumental in keeping this tribunal process together. One is, of course, our International Secretary, Nadine Nembad. Nadine has been the Secretary General of the World Forum of Fisher People. And the other is Jesuratnam. Jesuratnam has been the director of SNEHA, an organization from Tamil Nadu in India, which has very interestingly, despite being a small organization from a small region, being part of the National Fishworkers Forum and several others, SNEHA was the organization that put together the entire tribunal's framework. Of course, there's a host of organizations, as you will see in the listing that will come up later, who all were behind in bringing this process up and putting it together. But SNEHA played a very important role. And Jesuratnam, as the leader of the SNEHA organization from India, has played a very critical role in this. I'm very, very happy and honored to be inviting both of you. Nadine, can we start with the context and welcome from your side? I know it's an unearthly hour at your part of the world in Central Americas. Thank you for being there.
Thank you, Vijayan. I just want to give a real quick, because I know we have a good amount of hours to go, a real quick and warm welcome to everyone. So I will bid each and every one of you friends. I see members, I see allies, I see support group. I don't want to call names, but it is very warming to see so many persons here on this very important call. It's a very historic event for the WFFP and for our members in Asia. So I want to bid you welcome, and we are here to look at this international conference, and it will expose many impacts of the blue economy. So we will hear from many of our friends and members representing many communities along the Indian Ocean, and they suffered from the tribunals. We learned that they suffered from many blue economy projects, and we will hear from them. So my people, let us sit back and let us learn from our friends in Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Thailand, Indonesia, and India, we as community people, we need to raise our voices. So I will say blessings to all of you from around the world. I want to have a quick start. So I will welcome Miss Jesu, who is from India, our main woman contact in Delhi. She will share with us a closer context of the situation. Please, Jesu, go ahead and welcome again.
I apologize. Yes, so just before you come in, Nimal, can you kindly check that you are speaking on the Sinhala channel? We cannot hear you. If you're still logged in, Nimal, please make sure you're speaking on the right channel. Your microphone is off, actually. So you need to open your other microphone, close the one that's, there you go. Please
Okay,
speak
now
on the
I'm
Sinhala
speaking
channel.
single one.
No, that's the other one. Turn off this one and turn on the other one, please. Yeah, you must turn on the microphone on your interpreter device. That's the green one. Green logo. Nimal, are you able to do that, or do you need me to switch your devices?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you on this one. It's the other one that we'd love to hear you on.
Main channel.
If you can open your microphone, I'm going to ask you now. You should receive a message. The hosts ask you to unmute. Hey, okay, speak now. That's great. So that's the one you need to speak Sinhala on. Thank you so much. Thank you. Yes, so go ahead. I apologize.
Yeah. A good day to all of you, because we are in different time zones. Yeah, Nadine as well introduced me and also called me for setting up the context. I wanted to share the screen. It will definitely, I will try and finish it within 10 minutes, not more than that. So now I have shared the screen. Let me put the slide. Where is it? That's always I find it difficult. Okay, let me move on. This is the thing. This is just I am trying to say a glimpse of the process. What where we stand now. We are here on the tribunal internationally. We have gathered here, and also we are going to, as rightly told in the earlier when Vijayan was saying, that we are going to release, and also the jury team is here to share the their verdicts also of the respective countries which they were part. Okay, now as you know, the objectives of the entire thing was production of knowledge, and this was done as part of a research, as well as 1 minute, yeah, yes, and now to evolve South and Southeast Asia. I am finding it some difficulty in switching off my side boxes. Yes, it's all coming up and again. 1 minute. Yes. The ground that explores the established dominant discourse on blue economy and this professed merits, and to explore the socio-economic, political, ecological implications of blue economy on coastal communities, especially SSF and women, to evolve a South and Southeast Asia declaration towards evolving alternate jurisprudence for restoring and strengthening customary governance and user rights by ensuring the ecological integrity of marine, coastal and terrestrial ecosystems. This was our objective, and our assumptions, as we have already shared in most of the tribunals. It is ecological externalities, exclusion of marine and coastal as communities, and enforcement of marine security. These are the three assumptions, and we, through our study and through research and the interactions with communities, we have proved that this is the reality. Now, collaborating partners are from Sri Lanka, NAFSA is here, Indonesia, Kiara is here, Thailand, SDF is here, Bangladesh Coast is here, and India, it was NFF, and we don't have Peter anymore, but Peter was very active, and he supported all the things in a great way to make it a reality, and today we are here. And methodology, as we have shared earlier, it was field visits, focus group discussions, in-depth interviews with people, and interfacing with the academicians and researchers, and interaction with the leaders and political parties, and inception, perspective building, and validation workshops at the international level as well as national level. Both we did. The next slide goes to where all we visited and the different ecosystems. As most of the participants here, they will know that when the jury verdicts is coming, and also it also talks about the different parts, how it has affected, how the communities are affected. So the different ecosystems I would like to highlight: coastal, lagoon, bay, even gulfs in certain places, island ecosystem in Bangladesh, and island coral reef ecosystems in Indonesia. So different ecosystems and different field visits. Through different field visits, we visited these systems, and also the BE components. What we saw there was mostly ports, MPS, marine protected areas, maritime transport, then tourism, capture fisheries, coastal special economic zones, and again MPS, marine spatial planning, especially in Indonesia. That are the B components. Then east coast and west coast, again the ecosystems are coastal brackish water, mangroves, inland, island coral reefs, and also Gulf of Coast and in the Gulf and island coral reefs, again backwaters. And the BE components, as I already shared earlier, here to add to it, there is coastal management and blue flag tourism and small scale marine fisheries, oil and gas exploration, major export, and hydrocarbon exploration, also infrastructure and others, petrochemical hubs. These are the mining and shipbreaking. And then coming to the next thing, these are the different jury team who were there to listen to the depositions and the testimonies and come out with verdicts. So in the 5 countries, 6 tribunals happened, and these are the jury team. And anyhow, this will be again, when you go through the website, you will see that. So next slide. This is about Sri Lanka. What we visited there, as what we listed there, is pictured here. It is port city project, then definitely the people's area where community are living and erosion is happening in a greater extent, and also the tourism projects. So these are the areas we visited and interacted with the community. Next comes Bangladesh. Again, we have visited Maheshkali Island, and what we have seen there, and the drying fish yard, and where fisher women are involved, and they are affected to a great extent, and the tourism area. And so these are the different areas, pictures what we have shown here. Next is Thailand. The Kra Canal is the greatest thing, and the Shongla deep sea port expansion is another big project coming there, and Pakbara deep sea port project. These are the major areas where we visited, and we have highlighted it. The community have deposed, and they are the jury verdict is also reflecting on that. Indonesia, definitely the Jakarta big city construction project, and also the different islands where there was island tourism being promoted, and the Pari Island and the other islands where we visited. And there were also entire mariculture projects and other projects which we visited, and also had interactions with the community. These are the pictures showing that. West coast of India, it is talks a lot about the Gulf of Kutch and Gulf of both the gulfs in Gujarat, as well as then it running from Gujarat to the Kerala coast. We see all the different projects, like in Karnataka INS project Seabird, and in Kerala Villingam port, and in Maharashtra it is the road highways, as well as the port project Vadhavan port coming in a big way, and people are being evicted, and the tourism projects and sand mining in Kerala. So these are photographs showing that, and our areas of visit. East coast is Again, another area where we have the Koringa sanctuary. At the same time, in that there are oil mining, oil drilling projects and the exploration projects, then Adani port and mariculture, no, aquaculture, and to a great extent in West Bengal, the tourism projects and the construction. These are the areas we visited, as well as had interactions, as we told earlier, with the communities. The major conclusions, only with the conclusions I will end up. And yeah, people, from people's commons to corporate property, that is one of the major thing we observe. From inclusion of power holders to exclusion of right holders, that's another thing. From ecological integrity for all to economic prosperity of a few. From food sovereignty to purchasing power based on nutrition and market determined food. From decentralized powers to centralized militarized governance. From disaster resilience to disaster capitalism. From sustainable use of natural resources to financialization of natural capital. From self-sustained livelihoods to ecological refugees and distressed migrants, as a ready surplus army of labor and labor skilling for the receding needs of technology fueled capital. Then consultation of all these processes through sustainable development goals. And we talk of multi-stakeholderism and other stakeholder concept, and where the global capital enabled by nation states to appropriate processes, dictates access and usage, and controls supply and creates demand for technologies, and manage the political discourse through sophistication and manufactured consent, with the active handholding of fascist regimes, and increasingly worldwide, especially so in South and Southeast Asia. These prove the assumptions of externalization of ecological resources, exclusion of resource dependent communities, and enforcement of militarization for the accumulation of global capital and centralization of governance at the national and global level. So, conclusion for the empirical evidences from people's commons to corporate property, which we already told, and from so that is already done. Thank you. Then next is BE global pathways we have just listed. These are the pathways of global pathways for change, and that is from 2009, then Sangan Billions, 2012 Rio de Janeiro, then Blue Economy Summit, Our Ocean, UN Conference comes next, and World Ocean Summit comes next, Sustainable Development Goals in 2015, second our second ocean conference, then the Sangan Billions revisited. So these are the yeah, and then the final slide talks about outcomes of B. So multi-stakeholderism as a universal concept is accepted by everyone. It is made to be accepted. Homogenization of production of monospecies in agriculture, pisciculture, capture fisheries through land conversion and reclamation at the cost of ecological destruction and exclusion of communities. Promotion of global governance through technology transfer on monetary aid to coastal nations. Promoting global media in favor of the blue growth model through market-based economy, and promoting a structured consumer class by green technology, traceability, and compulsive consumerism. So deregulation of all laws, capital, land, labor, environment, name anything, all the laws are being deregulated to suit these needs. Promoting a homogeneous technocratic fisheries management model in all the coastal states. Promotion of speculative capital and digitalization of monetary transactions. End results, externalization of, as listed in the beginning, these are the 3 E's what is being done to the communities and the resources and the development. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jessica. If you could just stop the screen share. Yeah, and I know this is not an easy task to quickly put together the entire methodology that was undertaken so meticulously by the Sneha initiated team of researchers. There's of course the lead researcher, who's Gandhimati, There is Jones, Spartacus, and then there is Sridhar. All four of them, including Jesu, were part of the primary research that made this possible. Thank you very much. You have also brought in the whole concept of how B frames itself around exploration, expansion, and exploitation. And I think as we, every time when the tribunals were held, we went back to these questions. We got an opportunity, as it has been a pioneering effort, to say the least. We got an opportunity, I think, from the first time, for the first time, from the fishing communities and the coastal communities to hear what is the impact that blue economy related initiatives and projects are having on their livelihoods and also land. I think that has been the essential success of this tribunal, that for things that so far have always been spoken about by the World Bank, the FAO, the UN agencies, the governments, for the first time, I think the tribunals managed to bring together communities to speak vehemently their viewpoints, their perspectives, and their alternate vision of what should be a development paradigm, to a host of very prominent jury members that we had. We are going to hear from some of them at least today. Thank you very much once again, Jesu, and also thank you, Nadine. But Nadine, you have to come back now. You have an additional responsibility to make sure that the release, so we have, of course, the launch of the website, as well as the release of the global release of the verdicts of the tribunals of the 5 countries, held over 6 tribunals, as I mentioned earlier. So Nadine, over to you. We have the special guest, just a word before that, we have the special guest, Makoma Lekelekela from South Africa, Goldman Environmental Awardee, and also someone who is very reputed across the globe for her work, both among indigenous communities in terms of the affirmative politics for alternate development, and also for her own work spanning across Africa, in terms of bringing together resilience and communities for Mother Earth rights. We have also Dr. Vandana Shiva. I hope Dr. Shiva has joined. Dr. Vandana is a reputed environmentalist across the world from India. So over to you, Nadine, in doing the release.
Right, before I start, I just want to acknowledge 2 important persons for the WFFP. I see them on the call, so anything pertaining to the WFFP, we must acknowledge our co-chairs, Miss Christina Lua from Kenya, and I also see Moises Osovato from Honduras. So welcome, co-chairs. It's a pleasure that you have good electricity, internet, and everything to participate. So we are going to release the website. I've seen it already. It's a very beautiful page, and I want to further elaborate on these important people that will be launching. So I will first call on Miss Vandana Shiva, who will be releasing the website, and I will let you know a little bit more about Miss Vandana. She's an Indian scholar, an environmentalist, a food sovereignty advocate, and anti-globalization author. Now Shiva has written more than 20 books. She is one of the leaders and board members of the International Forum of Globalization and a figure of the anti-globalization movement. It doesn't end there. She is a member of the scientific committee of the Fundación Ideas. This is Spain's Socialist Party's think tank. She's also a member of the International Organization for a Participatory Society And I want to finally say that she has received an award. It is called the Right Livelihood Award, and this was in 1993. And this award was established by a Swedish-German philanthropist. And this award is regarded as an alternative Nobel Prize. So, Ms. Vandana Shiva, I would like to pass the microphone to you.
And could you let me know what it involves releasing a report on a digital? First of all, I'm here in solidarity with all of you, all the movements from the Bay of Bengal and South Asia and Southeast Asia, all the fisherfolk movements, all the movements of working people who care for the earth and protect natural resources. So I'm very happy to do whatever it takes, virtually cut a ribbon. And again, congratulate all of you for the amazing work you have put in creating this tribunal and in also documenting. I've already congratulated the team, the researchers team. In today's world, to do research like this as people's movement is a miracle, and you have performed that miracle. Thank you.
I think we are seeing the website here on the screen, so thank you. I guess we cut that imaginary ribbon as a launch. So
and also make real nets, like the nets of the fishing people. Yeah,
beautiful. Well said. That's very beautiful.
Fishing people has to be our inspiration to create nets of solidarity amongst ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you. Very, very nice. We're still seeing the front page of
this is only
the website.
The website.
Maybe someone can send the link in the chat of this conference. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Nadine, and also thank you, Dr. Shiva, for doing the formal release. As you said, what does it take to do release a report online? And the answer is that yes, well, we just showed everybody the portal as well as the report. I mean, of course, the last part of the report, I mean, we will have to, it looks like there has been some bit of layout issues in the report as it went onto the website today. So we might actually be taking it off sometime tonight and reloading it tomorrow morning. So the final version, downloadable version, will be up there by in another 24 hours time. But in the meanwhile, an amazing group of people, as Dr. Shiva correctly said, an amazing group of people were behind putting this together. Beyond the Sneha team and the research team and all the host organizations whose names came up on your screen a while back. I mean, all of them came together to do this, but also a lot of individuals, both from the fishing community, youth, to a lot of support activists from across came together to do this for us. So thank you all very much for releasing this report and launching the website. We are hoping that this website goes on to become a real good repository to put people's perspectives on blue economy as a collective repository from across the world. And we also hope that by sharing this methodology of what was done by Sneha and Coastal Action Network and National Fishworkers Forum, along with the World Forum of Fisher People, in holding this tribunal, we also hope that it becomes a certain kind of a model for people from across the world to take forward this agenda of the people's tribunals to make it a global reality of a collective response from across the world to this giant new development paradigm that we are faced with. Let me just quickly move on to the next section of the program. We have basically put together a team of people, and our eminent jury members, many of them consented to being part of this. So what we have is a segment where, we will start with Ms. Paula Satisabal from Australia, She will be presenting an analytical summary uh, of the Indian Ocean Tribunal verdicts. She'll take about 10 minutes time, followed by jury members, that is Justice Retired Kannan for the Indian East Coast Tribunal, Justice Anjana Prakash for the Thailand Tribunal, Lizzie V. McDade for the India West Coast Tribunal, Advocate Anand Grover for the Bangladesh Tribunal, and similarly Ezra Bogori for the Bangladesh Tribunal, Noor Hidayat for the Indonesia Tribunal, and Makoma for the Sri Lanka Tribunal. They will all be speaking for just a few minutes, 5 minutes each, about their experience of these tribunals and what their reflections are in terms of the way forward. After which we will be having response and reflections, and that's where we will get to hear Professor Liam Campbell, Dr. Vandana Shiva, and Makoma Lekalakala on the way forward strategies for the community as well as solidarity organizations to take forward this work. And then we conclude in about an hour and a half from now. We will be concluding with a discussion which will entail many of you quickly responding on the whole tribunal verdicts as well as about the way forward. Over to you, Paula. Thank you very much for coming on board. Paula has been an amazing support through this work of the tribunals. Paula has been a scholar, someone who has been deeply engaged with, ecology and human lives. She has been a human geographer, ecologist, worked on several environmental governance issues of the sea and also on social justice issues. Paula is a postdoctoral researcher at the School of Geography, University of Melbourne. I don't want to take too much time introducing you or embarrassing you here.
Yeah,
So over to you, Paula. Thank you very
Thank
much
you
for
so much.
joining us. And it's an
Thank you.
amazing presentation you have put together. We look forward to it.
I'm honored to be here to present with all of you. I'm trying to share my screen, but I can't. Could you please grant permission?
Carsten, could you just make Paula also the co-host, please? Carsten?
I'm trying.
I just did that.
All right.
Yes,
All right.
now I can do it. Yeah, perfect.
If other people have presentations, kindly send them to Karsten to forward to interpreter. We'd love to have them in advance. Thank you.
Can you see it?
Yes.
Yes, good. So thank you for this invitation. I'm honored to be here and to be able to join this amazing effort and to celebrate this website. I'll be presenting a brief summary of the verdict, and although I'm sure I'm not making justice to all this amazing work, I hope to bring some key themes and discussions that arise in these different events. So So in general, there's a recognition by members of the jury and also by the testimonies of fishers, unions, women, indigenous peoples, that the blue economy is an accelerated neoliberal and capitalist coastal development. It involves industrialization and privatization of commons. It works through exploration of ocean resources based on scientific assessments, expansion of coastal marine sectors, and exploitation of ocean resources. So you might be wondering, is this old wine in new bottles? It sounds like something we've heard before. The rapid coastal change since the 80s has accelerated, and now we see a greater role of domestic and foreign private actors, which account for at least 78.5% of the total investments. But we also have multinational corporations and international finance institutions, all of them collaborating and creating networks and flows of capital to enable this blue economy to take place. Nationally, we see clear human rights violations, violations to a right to life, to livelihood, to freedom of information, to free and informed consent, freedom to fish, freedom to equality, the right to equality, the rights of women. And we see that although some countries like India have recognized these rights in their constitution, this is not always the case. So there's a lack of recognition of basic human rights and women's rights, particularly in Sri Lanka and Thailand. We also see new reforms and policies, and these reforms and policies are enabling the blue economy in all these different contexts to emerge. These policies are creating space that enables the prioritization of economic development, also the creation of coastal economic zones, deregulation, reduction of collective tenure and environmental rights, as well as the repression of activists and criminalization of fisher workers. And we also see an international law instruments being there, but not really helping much within the different struggles of fisher workers and coastal communities in these countries. We see that although some of these countries have adopted these international instruments, they're not always ratified. And although some of these like the struggles and cases, legal cases, end up in courts, there's not a lot of monitoring and actual support to ensure the protection of these agreements. So the blue economy in this context involves a very complex network of different capitalist investments, including from tourism, we have extractive industries and industrial development, we have exclusionary conservation, port infrastructure project, militarization. There's evidence in all of these types of business of the invisibilization of fisher workers and coastal communities. There's evidence of environmental degradation, pollution, coastal erosion caused by these projects. We also see evidence of the destruction of mangroves, fishing grounds, and coastal livelihoods. There's threats to food security and food sovereignty. There's ocean grabbing, displacement, privatization of commons. And there's also the uneven impacts this has on women, indigenous and ethnic minorities, as well as on migrants. Overall, we also see a lack of representation, of consultation, of the use of prior informed consent and participation. There's changes in the access to and control over fishing grounds and fisheries management, and governments are prioritizing economic development. The goal is profit, no matter the cost. There's a lack of trust, a lack of compensation, and of course, a lack of redistribution of that wealth. Corruption and corporate capture comes not only from local elites, but also from foreign private actors, which are new to this bricolage. There's also neglect, violence, and oppressions, and worryingly also, we see some activists being murdered and also threatened. But we also see the strength, resistance, the protest, the social mobilization, and all the solidarity that this tribunal and all these different groups are creating through their everyday actions and protections of coastal and marine spaces. Among these projects, some unique characteristics of port infrastructure, we see large infrastructure projects like ports, seawalls, airports, which have major impacts on women and also coastal livelihoods. Some of these projects are often linked to extractive industries, are often linked to other extractive industries, particularly to mining. We see also corruption and trust issues here and the violation of working rights and often forced labor. Some of these cases and the struggles have taken to courts, and although some favorable sentences have happened, these are often not fully implemented or just lifted by other court proceedings. In regards to extractive industries and industrial development, we see expansion of mining, salt harvesting, offshore oil and gas, coal-fired power plants, aquaculture, maniculture. The lack of clarity on policies regarding compensation, resettlement, and rehabilitation are clear. There's also a lot of concerns in terms of militarization. This involves physical threats, harassment, limitation to freedom of speech, gender violence, forced eviction and displacement of coastal communities, false criminalization of fisher workers, as well as, for instance, in Sri Lanka, ocean capture by the military and violence also enforced through illegal fishing and drug trafficking. We see also an expansion of exclusionary conservation with expansion of marine protected areas and blue carbon initiatives, also focus on financialization of nature, so payments for ecosystem services with very limited benefits for coastal communities. These
Excuse
also
me,
come in.
Paula, some
Yes.
people here are not professional interpreters. You would help them greatly if you were to speak more slowly. Thank you.
Sure, absolutely. So in terms of tourism, there's expansion of tourism infrastructure. And it's interesting because tourism also emerges hand in hand with the expansion of exclusionary conservation. These projects there's also the false promises of community-based ecotourism, social, economic, and environmental benefits that are not really seen by the communities. The privatization of beaches for tourism and for foreigners, as well as, again, in Sri Lanka, the tourism sector being controlled by the army. So in summary, the jury verdict highlights the importance of representation and participation of fish workers. It is important to highlight that this representation needs to have a gender approach, needs to include ethnic minorities and marginalized groups. It highlights the importance of solidarity networks and the communication and access to information. Yet it also shows the importance of storytelling and these testimonies that we heard. They're really valuable and important as political tools in bringing us all together like we are today to discuss them and to try to understand and plan what to do. There's an important focus and need in challenging growing inequalities in terms of power relations, as well thinking of it in geopolitical terms. This is not only a country-based, but there's all these different relationships that matter in thinking how to overcome these. Issues of access to and control over resources are central, as well as tenure and use rights. Overall, panels through the different tribunals also acknowledge that we need to rethink development. We need to move beyond capital-intensive approaches to ocean development. Fishing as a way of life is not just a job, and it requires also recognizing the social ecological impacts. Well, but there's also concerns about ecological impact assessments are not always, and they become quite political. There's also recognition of the importance of holistic and integral understanding and governance approaches that are centered on Fisher's traditional knowledges. All these, of course, in the context of the pandemic and climate change, raises a lot of alarms and on the relevance of ensuring fishers have social security, access to health, and food security. And overall, all this requires access to justice. We need to ensure there's mechanisms and tools and support and solidarity to ensure fisher workers have access to their human rights, and there's procedures for these violations. There's also important discussions that need to take place in terms of redistribution and environmental justice, in terms of policy and law reforms, those that are needed to support fisher workers, but those are also enabling this blue economy, and as well as challenging militarization and the criminalization of small-scale fisheries. So I'd like to thank you. And of course, there was a lot in these summaries of the verdicts that I couldn't include, but I want to thank the fisher worker unions, associations, women, senior indigenous and ethnic minorities that participated, as well as the collective and civil society organizations, experts, members of the jury, and of course, the organizers and research teams for this wonderful effort.
Thank you very much, Paula. That was indeed a gigantic effort of putting together all the different tribunal verdicts. I can already see a smile on the face of Justice Kannan, one of our very honorable judges from India who was part of the jury. He's definitely wanting to bring on his comments. You've done a fantastic job, Paula. Thank you very, very much
Thank you
once
so much.
again. And I would actually, audaciously request you to give us a paper that can go as a executive analytical summary ahead of the verdicts, keeping these points. If you are busy with that, I'm going to immediately ask our documentation friends to step in and send you from your presentation, how the way you presented it today, along with your PPT points, and send you some sort of a draft so that you can just develop it and give it back. We would definitely like to have it on the web page as well as on the report.
Absolutely. I'll be honored to
Yeah,
do that and contribute. Yeah.
thank you very much. So we would just straight away go to hear the views of our honorable jury members. As you see, Justice Richard Kannan is already on the screen. He was with us in the East Coast Tribunal. So in terms of India, because of the vastness of almost the 7,800 odd kilometer stretch of coastal area that India has, the tribunal organizing committee decided to split that into two different tribunals and have it done as East Coast Tribunal and the West Coast Tribunal. Both were held in a gap of about 15 days from each other. The studies were done by the research team, of course, in two different phases, and as you can see, the verdicts are also separately done by two sets of jury members. Justice Kannan will be representing with the East Coast verdict. He will also be sharing quickly. I mean, unfortunately, our jury members get about 5 minutes each to reflect. He was formerly a judge at the High Court of Punjab and Haryana in India. He's held several positions. I don't want to detail them out here, but he has been someone who has always held an important juristical role for the last person. What our father of the nation, Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi, said: have the last person in your mind when you decide or when you govern. And I think as a jury, as a judge, Justice Kannan has always had that. Thank you very much for joining us yet again. Over to you, Justice Kannan.
Thanks, Vijay, for the big words. My fellow members of the jury, the Secretary General, the General Secretary, Nadine, and for all those persons on the other side of the computer screen. I congratulate you first on the launch of the tribunal website and the release of the international report. When we're talking about the responses of the affected people to the impacts of blue economy, I suppose we are taking an a priori assessment that all is not well. And we are discussing just not one country, but populace of India, Indonesia, Thailand, Bangladesh, and Sri Lanka with large coastlines. We are talking about the problems of a large multitude of people divided by geography, nationalities, but united by travails. There ought to be, therefore, large areas of congruence in the reports from several of the countries. And as I present a report as a representative and as a person who heard the affected people on the eastern coast, or what extends probably on the eastern side, about 3,000 kilometers, I know I echo the sentiments of people living beyond this geographical boundary only. It just has been taken through by Paula in the summary of reports. Almost all the countries are driven professedly through welfare economics with the state machinery at its helm. It is an utter travesty about how the state acts against the interests of our own people and uses law as the tool for most of the unlawful activities. We flout almost all international conventions. Paula literally put on a tabulation the articles of the various conventions, some of them, of course, not ratified. They assure to people against rights against deprivation of means of subsistence. Then we flout them. Exploitation of natural resources, we do exploit. UN Declaration of Rights of Indigenous People, whose rights are trampled without being consulted. No consultation, just bulldozed through. UN Declaration against evictions and displacements under veneer of development, with the scant regard of not exploring possible alternatives to eviction, to minimize displacements and safeguards against forcible eviction, even if you have international conventions, they are also easily flouted. Transgression are probably more brazen, to name but few when we're talking about in the Indian context. It was the violation of the constitutional guarantee, which Article 21 of the Indian Constitution provides for a right to life, which is combined with the directive principles, which is there in Part 4, the exhortation to protect working people in dignified, humane conditions. That's all given a go by. Destroying the public trust doctrine as a protector of natural resources. That is flouted. And the violations and dilutions of coastal regulation zone notifications. We have notifications that there shall be no development taking place, the so-called development within a particular zone. That is also given a go by. And the creation of Coastal Aquaculture Act that abnegates a judgment which was given in S. Jagannath versus Union in the year 1997, 1996 judgment. It banned the practice of aquaculture in CRZ zones and the violating express mandates of community consent in private-public partnership, mandatory impact assessment, and in the land acquisition legislation in 2014, they literally diluted all the provisions through amendments in 2014. In our sittings, we heard the findings, the research study, testimonials from coastal people, mainly of fish workers and fish workers union representatives. And there were expert presentations as well on the implication of the blue economy on coastal communities and small-scale fish workers, in particular on the east coast of India. The adverse impacts of effluent discharge from aquaculture, privatization of common property rights, such as Lake Chilka, the embankments built on the lake, which have disturbed the natural tidal web and flow, affecting marine life to a large extent. Favorable preferences to corporate sector than the local communities. Therefore, they're always the blue-collared, and blue-collared will be treated like that with the extra privileges. And in Tamil Nadu, there are moves to regularize aquaculture farms and create aquaculture farms and draw groundwater in plenty, even in places which are drought-prone. Destruction of mangroves and converting them into aquaculture has become rampant, and that's almost the norm there. Apart from that, the port modification and expansions, they seem a significant thrust area for blue economy. About 13 in Orissa and 27 in Tamil Nadu. If you know the geography, we are talking about literally one port in every 40-kilometer stretch of the coastal line. And one of the main concerns that was reported across port development projects is the high level of coastal erosion and the accretion effects it brings to the coastline. Particularly when you're talking about Orissa, Andhra Pradesh Orissa being a mineral-rich state, the processing and loading of these cargo is expected to also create tremendous pollution to air, water, soil, and the irreversible waste. Just not this, the land grabbing and harassment of fishers are also very serious problems. We gathered evidence that in Kakinada harbor, that is in Andhra Pradesh, one of the states abutting the line, about 18 kilometers of coast has been literally washed away. Now, the infrastructure projects include coastal economic zones, offshore oil and gas explorations, allied infrastructure of culture fisheries. And the testimony example which was given from Visakhapatnam, Vizag, as we say, along the Andhra Pradesh coast, again, where pharmaceutical companies have raised levels of pollution which have directly attributed to female fertility. And while community-based ecotourism centers promised employment for the fishers, they've literally, the reality is that they have been pushed as mere workers and labor in the informal tourism economy. There was a poignant rhetoric in one of the presenters before us who said, people are not poor. Policies impoverish them time and again. We have seen that in land acquisition, induced vulnerability because of state policies, redundancy and displaceability are built into these systems. By not taking people into these processes, they, referring to the state, are creating systems of invisibilizing. So powerful rhetoric from one of the speakers there, that people are not poor, but they're impoverished from time and again. So that's all just presented. The recommendations which we gave from the presentation which was given to us was the government's blue economy model seems to be really oblivious to the climate crisis that is currently facing the world. And to prevent further harm, withdraw policies that would facilitate coastal plunder. To build resilience, allow communities to say no. That's a simple thing. I must be consulted. So please allow us the benefit of saying, no, this can't go. Bring meaningful representation in governance at all levels. Hear the voices of women in particular. As a measure of restorative justice, infrastructure like beach resorts that have displaced community and possible to remove should be owned and managed in a way that compensates the affected communities. Communities should have representatives on boards and receive a share of the benefits as part of compensation for lost future livelihoods for people and their children. I was just seeing the draft policy of the central government. It unbundles schemes like introduction of financial incentives to attract technology, several contracts to be awarded for exploration of hydrocarbons. India will take a lead role in exploration of cobalt-rich seamount ferromanganese. Blue economy holds a promise for creating a multiplier of economic growth. Each one of these statements are what is presented in the draft causes me enormous concern. Just as I conclude, I thought I'll just share my own concern. I'm unable to resist the temptation to make at least a mention about degrowth, that there is already a full exploitation of sea resources, that it is time that we remind ourselves about redefining what development is, harnessing coastal wind energy by establishing offshore wind power plants and support to education in imparting skills in new wind power projects. The project of blue economy, it cannot be to make profits like what it says. We'll make triple or multiplier of economic growth. We ought not to be really thinking when we're talking about blue economy to make profit immediately. Investment shall be an ecosystem of restoration in projects like tidal marshes, mangroves, and the like. Just my own little thought to what was beautifully presented before us. And I had the benefit of hearing those poignant, difficult stories from persons. So thank you for this opportunity for presenting what we heard. And over to Vijayan again. Thank you.
Thank you, Justice Kannan, and also for bringing up the point of invisibilizing, and also technically bringing up that Justice Jagannath, the Jagannathan verdict from the Supreme Court 1996, where aquaculture in CRZ areas, you're absolutely right, was banned. And for our global audience, it's important for us to talk about the coastal regulation zone in India came about in 1991. We have seen a consistent, unfortunately, we have seen a consistent dilution of the coastal regulation zone, which was enacted to protect the Indian coastline as well as the communities living on the coast from undue exploitation and commercialization of India's sea and coast. We really are short of time, and I'm really grateful to Justice Kannan for really keeping it crisp and to the point. I'm very, very surprised and rather shocked that you actually went back into instances during the tribunal to narrate to our audience today. Thank you very much. I would want to bring on the West Coast Tribunal right away, which is Lizzie McDade from South Africa. She has been an environmental activist, rights activist for very many years. Someone who has done her studies in climate change and development. but also someone who went on to work with several African organizations and global organizations for ecological justice issues, engaging with local communities, national policies, on from nuclear to offshore oil and gas drilling. Her advocacy efforts are very, very wide ranging. And that's one of the reasons why she and Makoma together received the prestigious International Goldman Environmental Prize in 2018. Liziwe, once again, warm welcome to you. And over to you. You were there as part of a jury member in 2 tribunals, and we are honored by your presence in both West Coast Tribunal and your general reflections. You'll have to really restrict time. I'm sorry, but please do.
I think what I want to say to firstly, thank you so much. It's an honor to be here because this is about a change. I think this tribunal has really had an impact in terms of mobilizing and as Vandana Shiva said, the nets of solidarity, building that the voices from the ground up that this tribunal will raise to government. So I hope I can try and do it justice. And so what I have reflected on has also been covered by other speakers. So I'll try not to be too long. But this idea of human rights, livelihoods, and the ecological impact, they're all tied together. They're not separate issues. And I think what we've seen is that was raised in every person who spoke is that there's not this model of development that is being thrown around the world at the moment. It's a growth model. It's a commodification of nature and humans. It's pushing for profit, and it favors the few at the expense of the many. It seems to thrive through an abuse and manipulation of law. And these hard-won rights that people have are just being trampled. And I think that came through the words that were used in the testimony we heard was very much, things like this ruthless abuse. So I just pulled out, I'm sorry, I'm not raising the whole verdict because I think it's worth, everybody can read it, but I think some of the key things that, women are now going to be disadvantaged, not just that they can't fish now, but into the future that affects their incomes going forward. We heard testimony that the Narmada River has turned into a gutter, that it used to be fish and now it is pollution. So these are, that the whole coastline has turned into a series of industrial development. And that there are new laws that now promote luxury tourism, and the police are now, instead of protecting people, are now harassing fishers. So this and what comes through, the destruction of the ecology, the mangroves destruction, which is not just about the destruction of the current environment and current livelihoods. If you destroy the fish nurseries, you are destroying future generations of livelihoods. So this becomes a really serious undermining of human and the earth rights. So I think what we really heard was it's business on steroids, government is turning a blind eye, and the national interest has been subverted to be something called the corporate interest. And I think as a jury, what we came to conclude is that the governments of India and the state governments involved need to rethink that development model. They need to ensure that there's a protection of the ecology and understand that that is the basis for future livelihoods. The importance of respecting international commitments and obligations, and looking at any development is the cost of development in terms of the rights to life, with that framing. The importance of the recognition of women, and the rights of the community. And I just wanted to read one or two comments from jury members. Whose economy is this and whose livelihood is this? When we look at the blue economy from the law or Dharma, I can see that the scales of justice are tilted against the fisherfolk, Justice Akbar Ali. And then I think I would just end with a statement that the idea of people consulting and respecting each other and making decisions about how they live and how their lives should be managed and how their livelihoods and income should work. The respecting of that indigenous knowledge has gone. And it's being destroyed for short-term greed. And I think that would be the call that the jury has made, is the consequences for future generations. Is we end by saying it's imperative that small-scale fish workers and coastal communities are actively participating in the development decisions around them. So I mean, the bottom line is people matter, corporations. Thank you.
Thank you, Liz. Thank you very much for your both, insights as well as for concluding the West Coast Tribunal's verdict here. I think this whole question of people's participation, what democracy offers to especially coastal communities who are globally in a group of vulnerable and historically oppressed communities, having been at the receiving end of the mercenary traders time immemorial to the vulnerabilities now. I think this is the West Coast verdict in my own reading has actually been one of the very fine and put together verdict that has come together in a lot of senses. Thank you very much, Liz, for that. And while I say that, let me also congratulate and thank not just the jury members, but also the assistance provided by the jury assistance team for each tribunal. Some of our friends really put in a lot of effort to assist the jury in drafting and crafting these powerful verdicts, which also quote from international documents to country constitutional documents and former verdicts of important court judgments included. Thank you very much, Liz, once again. Can I request, can we move on to the Bangladesh Tribunal, where we have two friends, Advocate Anand Grover, as well as Mr. Ezra Mbogori. Both are present with us. I'll just give a quick intro to both. Anand Grover is someone who doesn't need an introduction in India, of course. He's a senior lawyer in the Supreme Court of India, very, very known for his legal activism and I dare say courage in interpreting the Indian law relating to multiple things, but also defending the questions of homosexuality and HIV patients has been something that really brought his legal battles to the foreground. He's a founder member of the Lawyers Collective. He was also the United Nations Special Rapporteur on the right to health for a long span of about 6 years, from 2008 to 14. He's an acting member of the Global Commission on Drug Policy and several other things. He's with us. Anand has just come back from legal intervention. So is Ezra Mbogori from South Africa. He was formerly the executive director in the Training Center for Development Cooperation based in Arusha in Tanzania. He was also the head of Akiba Uhaki Foundation, a relatively young human rights and social justice fund for Eastern Africa. So not only his civil society activism interventions, but also his academic interventions and his engagements in the past has definitely built a body of work in Eastern Africa. He's from Kenya and South Africa. I mean, he studied in Kenya as well, and in the Kennedy School of Government in Harvard University. He's a International Leadership Program Fellow and the Kennedy School's Mason Fellows program. So I bring both of you over. Can we start with Anand? Anand, over to you. Both of you are part of the Bangladesh jury. Your own reflections as well as pointers. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Vijayan. I'll try to keep to my time. I'm sorry I was not there from the beginning, but I did tell Nirmala that I had my court engagement, and Justice Kannan will forgive me because judges tell you to come at 11 and they say, no, we don't have time. Please come at 4 o'clock. But I was able to finish that work and I'm here with you. I want to congratulate all the members of all the juries of all the tribunals and the secretariat and the team members who've done an excellent job. I just want to very quickly go through a few points about the Bangladesh Tribunal. And basically, the jury did note, and this is in the report, I'm not making my own comments until later, that the tribunal had brought forward serious issues regarding basic human rights, loss of livelihoods, ecological impacts with the Blue Economy program being undertaken in Bangladesh. This adversely impacts on historically marginalized people.
I apologize for interpretation purposes. Could you kindly read slower or perhaps send us your text? Thank you.
This adversely impacts historically marginalized people of Bangladesh, especially traditional communities like fisher workers or who are currently facing added oppression from climate-linked disasters while continuing to bear the brunt of class and ethnic oppression. Now, the complaint that was made to the jury by the people actually alluded to a number of provisions of international rights, human rights instruments, primarily the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, and also the UN principles and guidelines on development-based evictions and displacement, and the Rio Declaration, and the principles therein, the Paris Agreement, Convention on Biological Diversity, etc. Now, I wanted to make a couple of comments here because I think it'll be useful for us. I think this forum is very important and it should see what it can do in the future. And we have to focus when we talk of violation of rights. Violation of treaty provisions are not directly actionable in domestic courts. Unless we are a monist country like Latin America, then we can go to our courts and say that the treaty has been ratified, then we can actually talk of violation of a treaty provision directly in the domestic court. We can't do that in India or in South Asia or in Australia or in England because we are what are known as dualist countries. So we have to actually domesticate a law pursuant to the treaty. Now, so therefore, when we talk of violation of international conventions, we have to decide whether we will take action later on. Is the tribunal thinking of taking action later on in a domestic court or in international fora? And their international fora requires that the state should be actually party to an international optional protocol, which most of the countries are not. So we have to think about that. And in terms of where do we need to fight next, domestic fora or international fora? But one of the things that unites all constitutionally, liberally governed countries is the notion of right to live with dignity, which is encompassed in our Article 21, which Justice Kannan referred to earlier. And that's the common thread which we are talking about here also. The right to live with dignity means a person has a right to livelihood, a person has a right to not to be evicted, all those things that we have talked about in terms of violations that are occurring. The evidence that was presented was quite voluminous, both in terms of special reports by the committee and also the fisher folk and the local residents giving evidence. In terms of Bangladesh, the focus was on Mahesh Kali Islands and the Cox's Bazar and Kotibanga places, where the blue economy is actually basically displacing and evicting people in those areas. And as has been put very aptly by other people, the capitalist path of development is being pursued very aggressively, leading to marginalization, leading to people into poverty. I can't help thinking, by the way, friends and comrades, that this is exactly what is going to happen to the farmers if the three laws are passed. And I think we should recommend in the final discussion, I don't know what the procedure is, that our struggle for the fisher folk and opposing the blue economy is ultimately tied up with the farmers who are also struggling against the same path of development. But coming back to uh, the Bangladesh Tribunal, it was noted that the aggressive industrial production has serious impacts on the economic system that support the life and livelihoods of communities. The climate crisis is a major consideration for Bangladesh that is being completely disregarded. Rise in ocean temperature is going to have an impact on fish survival and the more likelihood of storms. Similarly, if the seabed is raked through bottom trawling, through nodule mining, it would destroy the biological productivity of the ocean. And it was predicted that for communities depending on nature, it is not a process of change, it is a crisis. It is estimated that by the end of the century, practically 30 million people would become climate refugees. The jury observations were quite poignant. They were interim observations, and they noted that the neoliberal agenda of intensive production models actually was set in motion in the 80s, along with the agenda of World Economic Forum. What has happened now is what is known as destructive development. All this is pursuant to the international financial institution suggesting changes in laws and policies to implement the blue economy. In such a system, value of human lives and environment are sacrificed. Issues of displacement, loss of livelihood, food security, particularly for the marginalized sections, as seen in Bangladesh, are very worrisome. Similarly, it is also anti-nature, completely destructive of the environment. It was observed that what is done is gobbling up every bit of earth and destroying nature, only to push artificially prepared food like lab food and lab fish. Basically, this is against the very livelihoods and right to life of the fisher folk. The jury verdict is simple, and I think it's important to just note it. For want of time, I can't go through all of it, but there is a need for the governments, not only Bangladesh, but all the ocean countries to rethink the development paradigm. Make sure that it adopts inclusive and participatory development protocols. Pay immediate attention to the climate crisis and environmental concerns and seek alternatives. Last point I want to make is that I feel that the tribunal is really excellent and very good in terms of putting down ideas on paper. I have one concern which I must, as a friend of the tribunal, as a jury member, which I must voice. I have worked in the HIV communities, sex workers, drug users, and the LGBTQI community for the last 25 years. One of the things that we succeeded in doing, and I think we should emulate that, is that we were able to train our persons who were directly affected, whether they were drug users, people living with HIV, or sex workers, or the LGBTI community. I think that is necessary here. I would like to see more and more fisher folk participating rather than me. Today, I'm not a person who actually goes and trains people living with HIV. They come to me just like any other client to use the services of a lawyer. Whatever training we imparted to them over the 10, 20 years, they have learned from that and they are self-active. I think that is a need in the developing countries also. So I hope that we take on board this idea and we are able to push for that. Thank you very much for an excellent tribunal working system. And I hope that you will have success in the future also. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Advocate Anand. And yes, I believe Justice Kannan was here to hear that, dig about the judges letting the lawyers wait. On the serious side of the Bangladesh Tribunal, we also have words from Mr. Ezra. Ezra, as I introduced already, but Ezra's struggling with the internet connection a bit, but his audio is, I mean, he's not able to switch on his video. Okay, there you are. Excellent. Thank you very much, Ezra, for joining us. And yes, over to you.
Thank you. After Anand Grover's introduction, after his presentation, I feel that there's really not very much. He's done an excellent job at presenting what the jury felt for the Bangladesh Tribunal. So I just wanted to share very brief thoughts, maybe even cut some of your time, since you're running tight on time, Vijay. But I just wanted to say, first of all, that it was, for me, a very humbling experience to be part of the tribunal. And I was particularly impressed. And again, let me also echo the congratulations that have been sent to all those who are involved in putting together the final reporting and the website. I think these are amazing achievements. And what came through, I think, for me from the presentations and the submissions that were given during the tribunal was how impressive, and I was left both impressed and encouraged by the imagination, the creativity, and the determination of those communities that are affected by the blue economy. And especially, but it's also understandable that this is a part of their own struggles to sort of live decent lives, to live with dignity. And this is for me a very important marker, and in fact was part of the reason that we reinforced those recommendations that came out of the tribunal. It struck me that a lot of rules and guidelines exist to provide for the decent life, for the life of dignity that was talked about just now. And when we talk about there needing to be a new paradigm, it is that I think the new paradigm should itself embrace the idea of living by those rules and those guidelines and those recommendations and practice that respects the rights of people, and practice that respects all the guidelines that have been arrived at through long-standing experience. And I think this is what part of what has been missed in the past, which has resulted then in basically an abrogation of all those laws and practices. And in fact, when we hear about the eviction of people and the effects that it has on them, this is part of what's missing. So the change to a new paradigm, I think, is a really important suggestion going into the future. And then, and including them in your both planning, drawing from their experience, recognizing their expertise, because it's all there, it's all evident, I think is really important, and basically is captured by the second recommendation, which was that of an inclusive and participatory development practice, and embracing that. I think that we cannot ignore, I mean, we recognize the need to take account of a climate crisis, the ecosystems, and I think that these elements now, the effects that we are seeing, even I dare say, the COVID pandemic, are all basically warnings of what could happen. We need to learn from these. We need to learn that these are phenomena which are only a result of the ravaging nature of our practice as human beings on this planet. So in seeking alternatives, we need to remain, to become much more value-based. We need to respect our values, to respect that life depends on the recognition of the limits which we are trying to work against, and we're trying to overcome. And we also need to generate rhythms with nature, not necessarily be driven by, say, the neoliberal tendencies that seem to sort of dominate everything that we do. And in fact, that survival is based on those alternatives that will recognize and generate a new rhythm with nature. And that's really what I think is really important for us to take account of. So our alternatives have to be both value-based and respect values, and attempt to ensure all the time that we are recognizing that this is necessary for our survival. I think I'll leave it there, Vijayan.
Thank you very much, Ezra. I mean, it's extremely good to have both of you come on board and reflect on Bangladesh. There have been a host of issues. I mean, you've so far heard India and Bangladesh, especially the East Coast, West Coast, and Bangladesh. You can already see that there's a pattern of issues that emerge as Pola very rightly presented it in the beginning. Let me just go across to Southeast Asia. Let's look at the Indonesia verdict. In the Indonesia Tribunal was done, one of the early tribunals that was conducted. Indonesia verdict is part of the global verdicts that have been released today. We have Noor Hidayat from Indonesia. She's here with us. Noor has been an activist of more than 2 decades experience of dealing with environment and development issues in Indonesia. And she has spent a lot of time working with community organizations and NGOs in the region. She's the National Executive Director of WALI, the Indonesian Forum for Environment, which is also the Friends of the Earth Indonesia. She has also been in leadership position in many groups in the country. The Indonesia Civil Society Forum for Climate Justice, the National Board of Sawit, Palm Oil Watch, and Indonesia Greenpeace Southeast Asia. So she was the director of Greenpeace there. So Noor, over to you, because one of the reasons we felt it's important to have you on board was also the context of the new laws and regimes that are happening in Indonesia. We felt it's very important that you represent a host of those concerns and issues and you have interacted with the community very closely. So we thought in the case of Indonesia, it's better to bring in you than an international jury member. Thank you for joining us, Noor, and over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Vijayan, and good day to all friends in our struggle. It is really an honor for me to be part of this tribunal, and also I'm so humble to be here to share with you all the points raised in the tribunal in Indonesia. So the tribunal in Indonesia was hosted by Kiara. It's the People's Coalition for Fisheries Justice. And this time I want to also acknowledge my fellow jury in this tribunal, which are Justice Kolse Patil from India, Mr. Gam Shimre representing the Asia Indigenous Peoples Pact, Mr. Puven Mudli from South Africa. And also I want to congratulate all the organizers, researchers, and also everybody involved in preparing and organizing this international tribunal. It's very excellent job and very hard work you are doing, and we really appreciate what you have done. So as Vijayan say, in Indonesia, we probably have quite this different context because Indonesia last year, the Indonesian Parliament passed the job creation law. So it's known as Omnibus Law. So this law is an overarching law, contains over 1,000 amendments of 79 pre-existing environmental, labor, and investment regulatory laws. And from our experience, and also based on the testimonials from the local fishers community with the fisheries leaders, and also the human rights-based organization during the tribunal. So the jury observed that key concern of this law is that the fact that this law deregulates the provisions of environmental laws for several industry in order to facilitate private investment. So for several years, the government has been promoting the investment in many sectors in Indonesia, and this omnibus law basically accelerate the process by neglecting all the safeguards towards the environment and also the social condition that is necessary for the participation of the community and for their rights to self-determination in their life and livelihoods. So this has become the source of many injustices that are also experienced by the fisheries communities. And in many cases, that the protest by the community against projects that are impacting their lives are met with legal action or policy operations. So a lot of cases of criminalization experienced by local community, traditional fishermen, because they protest that their fishing ground was extracted by investment by extractive industries without their consent. So we are also observed that this omnibus law is basically part of the blue economic model as well, that making the role of the state reduce only as become a kind of broker, which through successive rounds of exclusion and enclosures redistributes coastal lands accompanied by the dilution of environmental laws and clearances. This is all for private investment. And although we experience this kind of oppression, the jury also feel that the community in Indonesia needs to propose and also push for alternative models of development that can be put forward by communities towards government because there are already examples exist that are ecologically sustainable and economically beneficial. So from this presentation and also testimonials from the local fisher community, the jury come up with their verdict, and it is very clear from our point of view that the Indonesian government is violating the rights of its people, including depriving them of their rights to free, prior, and informed consent, destroying the ecosystems, increasing inequality, and unjustly criminalizing those who speak out and also protest the action. And we also propose steps to the governments that basically the government urgently needs to suspend the omnibus law or redraft it so that it can realign with the community's aspirations. And we also underlines the needs of the participation, meaningful participation for local communities to determine what kind of life and livelihoods that they want, and not just as part of the blue economy that is basically commodifying their living space. And we also noted here that the role of the women should be recognized in fisheries, and their welfare should be actively considered in development and fisheries planning and management. The jury also recommends that the Indonesian civil society and the community brings this struggle to the attention of the United Nations, including UN Human Rights Council, and attempt to build pressures on the government using the international peer review process. I think that's some of the main points that I can share with you. Back to you, Vijay.
Thank you very much, Noor there. And as Noor correctly pointed out, the Indonesia Tribunal was of a great learning experience for many of us, also considering the fact that We also realize this has become a regional pattern in a certain sense for many countries across Asia to be diluting labor and environmental laws when you want to absolutely commercialize, privatize, and corporatize your natural resources. And I think this entire omnibus law of Indonesia, which is to be condemned internationally, and we must all stand in solidarity with the groups in Indonesia in their opposition in this fight for retaining the labor environmental framework and not diluting labor laws and environmental laws into a new low, all-time low for Indonesian history. There's a long history to it. I think GAM, and I thank you, Noor, for also reading out the names of other jury members. Many, I mean, in Asia Indigenous Peoples Pact, General Secretary GAM was there, and he did definitely picked on some of the aspects about indigenous communities as well. So I don't want to get into the details due to shortage of time. Thank you very much, Noor, once again. Friends, we do have two more countries to go. Basically, we have Thailand verdict, which was to be represented by Justice Anjana Prakash here. But Justice Anjana also happens to be caught in a bit of a dilemma. I mean, when she's busy because of the fact that she's also involved with one of the cases of the young climate activist who has been arrested recently in India. There's a lot of civil society opposition about it that has been going on. She has sent her apology. I'm not sure if she's able to join us any point of time. She had said that I will try to come into the latter part of it. She's also a practicing lawyer at this moment. Anjana is not there, but and also Makoma Lekalakala. Makoma was to also represent the Sri Lanka verdict, but we had also requested her to give her general observations for the entire effort on understanding and analyzing and taking forward the critique of blue economy globally. I would request that Makoma come together with the Sri Lanka verdict comments from her side on her turn. I would actually like to call upon somebody who was not a jury member, an academic, a great thinker and writer at that, Liam. Liam Gambling is Professor of Political Economy at Queen Mary University of London, where he works collectively at the Center on Labor and Global Production. He is co-author of Free Trade Agreements and Global Labor Governance, and he's also an editor of the Journal of Agrarian Change. Liam, thank you very much for joining us. Liam was not part of the tribunals. One of the reasons why we requested Liam to come on board was also to hear, because one of the things is, as I mentioned very early on in this conference, is that the blue economy was not a product of a natural evolution. It was brought in by the need of global capital to play on, to pick on a new field of exploitation. And I think that's one of the reasons we wanted an analyst, an academic like Liam to come on board and tell us more about it. Liam, we are overall running short of time, so we are really sorry, but you will have to cut short a little bit there. But over to you, Liam. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me. Please just let me know if I'm talking too fast for the interpreters. I'm honoured to be here, and it's difficult to speak after the amazing, brave and deeply committed research and organisational work that has gone into this whole process, which is astonishing. I want to take a step back and look at the bigger picture and the current phase of kind of global capitalism. Capitalists themselves are on an investment strike because of lower profitability. And as the powerful continue their permanent scramble to access and control nature, we see that capital is looking seaward. So the global ocean, I would argue, is the final frontier of absolute planetary space for capitalist accumulation. What this means is that physically there is nowhere else to go but inwards, such as nanotechnology, or in commodifying relationships among us, such as new services, fulfilling previously unknown wants. Now, importantly, much of this absolute space of the blue economy is already within the control of states. So exclusive economic zones, or EEZs, make up 35% of the surface area of the global ocean. And when talking about marine fish populations, around 90% of marine fish live within EEZs. And as we all know, under the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, states have sovereign rights over access to marine life. So this means that potentially 90% of world fish populations are already under possible democratic control. And of course, all of the countries took part in this process, the tribunal process, are to a large extent democratic. But we also know that the state is a site of struggle, and one where the interests of capitalists often prevail. So what I want to do in the next 5 minutes or so is to use history as a guide to think about today's blue economy. So in my new book with Alex Colas called Capitalism and the Sea, we trace different phases of what we call pelagic imperialism, fisheries imperialism. We start with Japan and its rapid expansion into the Pacific Ocean from the 1880s. And Japan was basically following an imperialist and modernizing logic that mimicked and morphed the practices of Western Europe's colonial project. So Imperial Japan's maritime industrialization was very much supported by the state. And its idea was to create jobs, to create a shipbuilding industry, to create ports, to earn export revenue through the extraction of marine life. And these are all pillars of today's blue economy. So in a way, it was very much a pre-World War II model of what we today call the blue economy. Now, importantly, part of Japan's story is that its fishing fleet was like the advanced party of Imperial Japan as it spread throughout the Pacific. Where the fishing fleet went, eventually the military boats went. And so by the 1930s, Japan was exporting fish products, canned crab and so on, globally. And about 30% of the entire adult population was supported directly or indirectly by the seafood industry. And then there's the entire maritime logistics industries and so on. So Japan was very much a blue economy, Imperial Japan. So all of this changed after World War II, and the US became the lead in expanding new frontiers of its own pelagic empire into the Pacific, including in Japan's old imperial space. Meanwhile, the French and the Spanish moved into West Africa in the 1950s. And then after overfishing there, they moved to the Western Indian Ocean in the 1980s. And the European fleets, as you know, have dominated the Western Indian Ocean purse seine industry ever since. Now, all of these cases are based upon the extraction of marine life to convert them into commodities for profit and moving to new frontiers in the oceans when the old ones are depleted or are less profitable. So just to make a quick kind of parallel.
If I may,
yes.
For interpretation purposes, any chance you can wear headsets? Because there's a bit of an echo that's difficult for us to manage.
Of course.
And if the future speakers have headsets, we'd appreciate if they wore them. Thank you.
Okay, give me a second. Is that okay? I can't see or hear anyone, so you have to tell me if you can hear me.
It's much better. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you. So just to step away from the fisheries story to look at the broader blue economy. So maritime logistics and the shipping lines of the 19th century. So there are some interesting parallels with the fisheries imperialism. Inter-imperialist rivalries saw different government states compete bitterly to establish national shipping lines, largely to try to rival the British Merchant Navy's dominance of that part of the blue economy. They controlled about 40% of global shipping. But the important analytical point here, and the political point, is even though these different capitalist interests were brutally competing against each other, they would also actively cooperate when necessary to ensure profitability, including through shipping liner conferences, which were basically cartels dividing up the global shipping routes and also blocking new entrants. Now, this is important today because while inter-imperialist rivalries might help us to explain, for example, the maritime rise of China, not only as the world's #1 distant water fishing nation, but also as an emerging leader of global shipping. And of course, the Belt and Road and the Maritime Silk Road projects. At the same time, as capitalists remain warring brothers, they are in bitter competition, but they are mutually dependent upon each other for raw materials, finance, and markets. Yet we know that these capitalist brothers actively cooperate when necessary. So in the blue economy context, this means actively splitting up crew working on boats. It means spatially fragmenting labor regimes to reduce possible solidarities. It means putting coastal community against community and nation against nation, including in negotiations over fisheries access revenue or to maximize sweeteners and incentives for coastal investment, which lots of people still want. So today, we are likely to see a continuation of the intensification of marine extraction as capital struggles to maintain profitability. As Marx put it, capitalists are fanatically bent on making value expand itself. The capitalists ruthlessly force the human race to produce for production's sake. So of course, nature is secondary in this story. Now, we can say in the blue economy discourse that capital is very much looking seaward. But I would argue that coastal communities also need to look inland. Why? Because we need to think about the relationships of the sea to the land. We need to show people who are less aware of the global ocean of the need to build bridges across sectors, across different areas. And to be clear that the global ocean matters to us all, from struggles over social reproduction, over racialized capitalism, over employment and pollution in cities, and how they all have deep-rooted connections to struggles over the ocean, and most obviously in relation to the planet's ecosystems and atmosphere. So when we hear calls for a just transition to a post-carbon world, that cannot only be in relation to justice for those in formal employment in, for example, Canada's coal mines or Germany's car factories. No, just transition must be an internationalist call, building within and across regions. And I think that the Tribunal is a wonderful example of precisely the power of talking to each other and trying to work together. Now, more specifically, are there ways that we can make connections between coastal fisheries and crew working on industrial fishing boats, for example? Are there concrete ways in which the maritime logistics, distant water fishing and offshore mining industries link with and articulate with small-scale fishers and fish workers? And can we build nets of solidarity amongst these different kind of sources of labor, as Dr. Shiba put it? I just want to make one quick note of analytical caution, and quite a few people use the concept of neoliberal to talk about the blue economy. I think the example of Japan in its imperial era is very much not a neoliberal project. And I think what's perhaps useful here is to think about what Liswy McDade said is really the fundamental problem here is capitalist growth models. And that's where people and nature are to be commodified. So whether it's neoliberal or the contemporary China's Maritime Silk Road strategy, which is not neoliberal, we should be thinking about capitalism. And so just to flip this, and just for another 2 minutes, so the flip side of Dr. Shiva's nets of solidarity is to think about the nets of capital. So in showing the linkages between coastal and oceanic capitalists, how can we learn to cut their nets in the aim of intergenerational development? So this movement against the blue economy might usefully be mobilized around, for example, major institutional moments such as the 26th United Nations Climate Change Conference, but not in the naive belief that states will suddenly see the light, as we know that states very often work against their own citizens, although this may help. But moreover, using international moments like this as a basis for rekindling and exploring solidarities and engaging in collective recognition of the contradictions of capitalism for labor and nature the world over. So 2 concrete suggestions. I wonder if it might be useful to identify some very specific areas of cooperation to build solidarity around the blue economy narratives. And these are both fisheries focused. So for example, can high seas fishing be one area where we can all unite? So for example, in the Indian Ocean, under the Indian Ocean Tuna Commission, high seas transshipment is allowed for longlining. This could be banned throughout the Indian Ocean with sufficient cooperation. And this would have very little impact on jobs, and it would ensure that the biggest, most fertile fish stay in the sea, reproducing themselves. Another area might be to counter flags of convenience because of the role of flags of convenience, as Vijayan pointed out. They dilute labor and environmental law. It's another source of dilution of labor and environmental law, which was a major cross-regional finding of the tribunals, and to which we might add flags of convenience allow big fishing businesses to engage in tax avoidance. Now, if flags of convenience were banned and beneficial ownership tied to boats, we could better understand and control industrial fisheries and thereby enhance the possible benefits for small-scale fishers. Now, I recognize that this is quite abstract compared to the very local struggles over coastal lives and nature. But if we start to focus on some of the tools used by capitalist interests, such as high seas transshipment and flags of convenience, maybe we can find a way both to cut their nets and to build new nets of solidarity among those interests. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Liam. That's a that's a gigantic task completed by you. You went from talking about the history of imperialism in the context of the oceans. You brought in Japan, China, both historically and in terms of where they stand today. One of the statements you made is capital is brutally forcing production for the sake of production at the cost of environment. And I think this is definitely something that resonates across, I'm sure, everyone who is in this call for sure, as to how it is happening. But you also went ahead speaking about the tools as to how to cut their nets for us to unite in terms of the struggle. I think one of the reasons why Sneha and several others got together and initiated this whole tribunal process, as you correctly pointed out, was to bring forth a global analysis of a critique of blue economy from the perspective of the affected communities, or may I call it the primary stakeholders of the oceans and the coastal lands, but also to bring together communities in that voice, in that resistance, to build probably what you said as a strategy of banning high seas from access to multinational corporations and all the Benami Taiwanese fishing vessels that are all over the Indian Ocean region too. I think you brought in the point of geopolitics very well. I think the whole question of China's role as the new capitalist model is indeed to be brought to question here, because they also, at some level, post the USSR breakdown, they also represent the communist world to their own linguistic preferences. But at the same time, we all know the reality is far from that. Thank you very much, Liam. I don't want to take any more of the time of the conference, but thank you very, very much. These pointers are indeed very, very poignant and very important for us to take forward in this discussion today. India time, it's 6:12. I officially have very few minutes left in this conversation, but I would like to bring in two of our, Justice Anjana Prakash is not able to join us, but the good news is that the climate activist who was literally abducted from her home by the Delhi police and brought to Delhi from her home, which is 2,000 kilometers away in the city of Bangalore from south of India. She has been granted bail by the court, and that is indeed a great news for the battle of and for environment, for livelihood, for climate justice in India.
Really a great news. Great news, Vijay.
Absolutely a great news. Thank you, Prafulada, for endorsing it, and thank you for being here too. It is indeed a great news for not just activists in India, but I think I'm sure across the world, because this first information report and the case filed was because Greta Thunberg had actually endorsed the protests on the farm law issue. And Advocate Anand Grover spoke about it. How is it that the battle of fish workers and the battle of farmers are no different battles? They are fundamentally against the new corporate model, which has taken on governance on its side. On the one hand, when we celebrate the release of activists who have been jailed, let us also not forget the fact that there are hundreds of others, not just in Indian jails, but across Asia, across the Indian Ocean region, where the tribunals were conducted, who have been in jail because of militarized state, increasing conservative command, the right-wing command over ruling regimes in these countries is a cause of serious concern. But the battle for the livelihood and the rights of the fishers will have to join hands at multiple levels with the human rights battle, with the civil liberties battle, with the feminist battle, and in the Indian context, the battle of the Dalit and the Adivasi, the indigenous communities, against oppression and exploitation. Can we have Makoma brought in here? I hope she has joined back. She and Liz were both in the midst of, I don't see her here, but let me request Dr. Vandana Shiva. Vandana was someone who was part of the jury process as well in Bangladesh, but at the same time, we had made a special request to Dr. Vandana Shiva, being one of the tall environmentalists and someone who has been who was part of giving birth to the idea of the National Fishworkers Forum in India, and who has continued her support, a brilliant supporter she has been for the fisheries movement in Asia as well, and globally a battler against, from the time the WTO regime took over. She not only represents the farmers' movements, I can confidently say that she has always represented the fisheries concerns whenever she has spoken, a food sovereignty, food security advocate globally. Over to you, Dr. Shiva. We look forward to hearing your comments, but also do tell us, I know it's a brief time that we are able to give to our speakers, but do tell us also your insights about the way forward in both the tribunal process, but also in this campaign, as Liam pointed out. Over to you, Dr. Shiva.
I think.
Thank you.
Dr. Shiva, you may have to, I think your net is giving some trouble. You may have to switch off your video to probably. Yeah.
Yeah, the
That's
networks are not good. And actually, it's not good for Zoom, but networks not working will be the saving grace for the universe. I hope they just keep collapsing and we can build real economies. Let me just get my notes 1 minute.
And
Anjana Prakash.
First,
yeah,
once again,
Justice Anjana
thank you
Prakash
so
has
much.
also joined us. Yeah, yeah, sure, Vandanaji.
Once again, thank you so much to all the fishing communities, all the researchers. And to Anand, I would say, I don't think something like this can come without participatory action research. I think the very basis of the research that has led to the tribunals is a participatory process where, of course, the fishing communities have been the lead, but some of us have to write, and it's a punishment we carry for having been to university and college, but it's a service we offer for those who do the real work. I think if we recognize the diversity of contributions we have to make, we will not bring into our work the hierarchies that the dominant forces have created. The jury members have already talked so deeply about the tribunal process itself and the case studies. I will just build on what you said, the way forward. I think the first step is very, very clearly that if the Green Revolution brought violent industrial technologies and extractive technologies to agriculture, then the Blue Revolution brought the extractive technologies to aquaculture. And the case, I worked very closely with the Jagannathans, I marched with them in the Satyagraha, and that case was so important to ban industrial aquaculture, not only because it upheld the CRZ laws, but it also made a distinguishing feature between industrial and artisanal. And in the fisheries community, this is known well. It's not well known enough in the agriculture communities, but I think this will become an important issue for uniting us, because what is industrial systems? Basically those based on fossil fuels, which lead to climate change. So one is to recognize what the Blue Revolution and the Green Revolution did, and see the green economy and the blue economy that's being built on that consolidation that's already there, and against which the farmers are fighting, and I believe against which fishing communities are fighting. We wouldn't have any of the laws we have if the fishing communities hadn't done the very hard work. So what is the green economy and the blue economy over and above the processes of fossil fuel-based industrialism and a war against local, small-scale artisanal production systems? It is the aspect of financialization, and I would add to it the next step of industrialization, which is the industrialization of the mind, the digitalization. I would recommend to all of you to read a new report that has come out, As If There Is No Convention on Biological Diversity, as if there is absolutely no obligations that have already been framed. The economics of biodiversity, the Dasgupta review it's called, I had to discuss it with the UK groups the other day, and I read a part of it. I didn't have enough time to read the whole, it's this fact. But the three things I will mention. So they talk about how before colonialism we were poor. No, the East India Company wouldn't have been created, India was poor. They wouldn't have come to India to grab 45 trillion of our wealth. They made us poor, as Justice Kannan, citing one of the witnesses, said, people are not poor. Policies impoverish them. Economic systems impoverish them, the dominant economic systems. There's a section there which is very relevant to the blue economy, but it's definitely relevant to the green economy, or the next step of industrialization of agriculture, which is digital agriculture, which, as Bill Gates says, is farming without farmers, and then goes on to say food without farms, just like in blue economy, they're talking about fish without the oceans, and fish without local fishing communities, The few people who work will be on the ships and the trawlers as slaves. There's a section there that says we did not know how to value resources. Coastal communities don't know how to value the coast, or the marine resources don't know how to value the sea. It is their sacred mother. And they're actually talking in the Dasgupta review that now that we have satellites in the sky, and now we can do digital mapping, now we can assign value. So you can see how the financialization system, merging with the digital mapping system and digital surveillance system, is what they're dreaming about. But it goes hand in hand with an assumption of the 1% economy, that the 99% can be made disposable anyway. People's lives and livelihoods can be wiped out with every trick under the trade. And people's resources will be enclosed, like every tribunal has summarized. It is an enclosure of the commons and a dispossession of people. But the enclosures of the commons is constantly appropriated with an argument of improving the use. Now, my work on the Green Revolution has shown that these pseudo-productivity arguments don't work. Fisheries also, if you know the work we did on the shrimp and pokali farming, so much more efficient, so much more productive. So they build on pseudo measures and then appropriate resources. We're feeding the world, we're growing more fish, we're growing more food. So one of the things we have to continue to do is look deep into the inefficiencies and externalities. I think the second thing was mentioned by Liam. You know, we've just had the disaster in my region, tragedy in the very area, the village where Chipko movement started. And Chipko, as you know, is what started me on my journey as an ecological activist. And I remember there used to be a song called From the Mountains to the Sea. So this appropriation is happening from the mountains to the sea. And I think we need, of course, the kind of synthesis and integration that you all have done in such an amazing way in the research for these tribunals. But definitely, as Liam also suggested, we need the sea and the land put together. We need the atmosphere, the land and the sea put together. That's the climate challenge. That's the climate challenge. And if we set ourselves a 5-year task to do two things, see the linkages through research and build the networks through activism. It's not an accident. And thank you for the good news about Disha's release. It's not an accident that little Greta was suddenly seen as a threat. At this time, notice that Bill Gates issued his grand book on fake solutions to climate change. Fertilizers, which are emitters of greenhouse gases, more industrialization, more trade in natural resources, more trade in ecological functions and ecological services. This is the financialization of nature. Now, not only are these rogues, and I will say they are rogues, and they're thieves, and they're the new robber barons of our times, but they really think they have us under such control and under such silencing that they can spell any pseudo-narrative and it'll have to be absorbed. So we have to keep speaking our truth, the truth of our realities, the truth of our struggles, the truth of nature. And when we realize that all people on the land and in the sea, in the mountains and on the coast, everyone is facing the same fate of disposability and resource grab through tricks of new civilizing missions, new colonial narratives. Not only is our unity much more powerful, but then the most important unity is that we are part of nature. One of the narratives was we are separate from nature. And, you know, at least I can say this for my long, long, long work in the service of nature. You work with her, you work in her service, the level of power. You know, I watch Bill Gates at each of his TV shows, and I look at his face and I said, what a sad and what a pathetic man. And I look at the faces of the farmers and I look at the faces of fisherfolk and so I said, what strength? And that strength comes from nature, from the soil, from the sea. Let's build that strength. I've called it Earth democracy. One final point. Not only do I see a coincidence between Greta and Gates on the climate change issue, that there is a criminalization of the fishing communities, the criminalization of farmers. I started to fight against criminalization of seed saving, which is something they wanted to do, and we never let them get away with it. But there will be a clear criminalization of activism and solidarity. And the new narrative, and I saw this in The Economist 10 years ago, that global solidarity between civil society will have to be broken if corporations have to get their way on their next agenda of the green economies and the blue economies. So what they will try and do is the economy has to be global, digital finance has to be global, but people must be locked into nations, and the national system will be militarized and be locked through surveillance systems. So our creativity now is to build solidarities all the way from the local sovereignties, the national, the multiple nationals, and all the international laws on labor, on human rights, on environment are international. They are being assaulted right now. All the laws of biodiversity, all the laws of food security and food sovereignty, they're under assault, but they're not gone yet. Let's stand together to defend whatever we have in our countries and internationally, but most importantly, what we have locally. We can't afford to not unite and create our nets, and we can't afford to not, through the best of our imagination, cut the nets that they're trying to spin around us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madanadi, for that. Yes, indeed, while we are staring at a world where it's
Vijayan, you need to unmute yourself. We can't hear you.
Can you guys hear me? Is it fine now?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Okay. So
we can't.
No, I think people are able to hear. So I mean, you built in both the practical framework of challenges that we hold in terms of, I mean, this whole thing of building networks and building alliances on the one hand, through research, building research linkages. This is a point that in India, we have often spoken about. We have struggled with it to keep the academic community and the research community along with the activist community and the movement community of people who are victims of these processes of green and blue revolutions as they keep changing the terminologies. So staring at a world where it is food without farmers and farms and fish without fish workers and sea, you brought in definitely the pointers of inspiration and energy. Thank you very much. As always, it's an honor listening to your views on this. I'm sure the discussion will take off from here, but we do have Justice Anjana Prakash here. She's actually someone who was part of our jury process, as I mentioned earlier. She was part of the Thailand Tribunal, and Anjana ji, because we couldn't get you earlier, we had kind of skipped the thing, but we would like to come back to you for your reflections on both the Thailand Tribunal and also about the overall process of tribunal and your own pointers for way forward. Thank you.
Am I unmuted now?
Yes,
so
we can hear you.
So sorry about joining in late. So sorry about this. Okay. The other thing is, you know, that I don't have my file just now because I was also involved in some other case, which really took up my energy and time. And there was a lot of, you know, a lot of lawyers who had joined in there. So I'm sorry about that. But the only thing that I can say is, you know, that actually I came in the tribunal as an unexperienced person. I didn't know anything about fisheries. I didn't know, you know, the dangers that were involved in it, the kind of encroachment that is coming in, honing in from every side, including the government. Because what happens is that on the one side, the government, you know, talks about environment, talks about, you know, talks about ecology, talks about the welfare of the people, etc. But at the ground level, when you go and see, you know, there's absolutely no participation of the people as it should come. And, you know, this is a recent example. The farmers protest is a recent example of this kind of callousness, you know, when the government on the one side says something, but does something else, because it is, they think that they are the ones who are the best persons to decide this. And on the other hand, when they are pitted against the activists, who, maybe intellectually, much more superior, having worked in that field, they see them as threats, and therefore, they need to be put behind the bars. This has been my, personal experience, going on, that's been going on now, these days. Where the fishery community is concerned, I was, sort of alarmed that women were not part of the decision making, of the fishery rights, etc. Neither the women nor, the ancillary people who were actually involved in the in the fishery exercise. It was only people who actually went out to fish, only they were dubbed as fishermen. But the persons who supported those fishermen were not counted. Now, where our tribunal was concerned, we laid stress on that was a very important sector which needs to be factored in. You need to take their inputs into count. They need to be listened to. They have to be involved in the decision making process. So this was one thing that our part of the tribunal really laid stress on. Anything else, I really don't remember, that we did. I'm sorry about it. It was nice listening to Vandana. Thank you so much. Anything else? I don't know. I missed Kannan. I can't even see him, in fact.
Yeah, this is Kannan, Anand, all of them were here. Anand also had to leave at 6:10. Just a few minutes back, he also left. But I would like to quickly remind the audience also that, we had a fantastic there, Justice Kannan is there. It's actually very interesting that, Justice Akbar Ali, when he was giving his comments after the tribunal that he was part of, he actually concluded, I mean, he also had a similar view that Justice Anjana just shared about the fact that, I was never exposed to fisheries issues. It's the first time I came in direct kind of, even as a legal questions involved with it, etc. But he said, fundamentally, what is haunting me is the question, whose blue economy is it? From what people are saying, what I'm hearing from people across the tribunal, what I'm haunted by is the question of whose blue economy is it? And I think this is, let's go back to basics here. I think that fundamental question needs to be posed back to the multilateral financial agencies and the, in the World Bank and others, as well as the governments that are actively pursuing the business of blue economy. As many of you know, and as you would know, Justice Anjana, the government of India since 2015 has decided to follow an aggressive policy of shifting industrial base to coastal areas. This announcement was made by Prime Minister Narendra Modi at the Somnath temple in 2015. He said that, we have to move out of the Central Eastern region. He did not mention the fact that there is aggressive resistance of indigenous communities there, but he said that we will move into the vacant coastal lands that we have, which is 8,000 kilometers of India's coastline. And I think similar is the ignorant response of many of the rulers of the day, that these are some, vacant lands that are lying there, which can be just occupied and be used for industrial tourism and petrochemical industry and other purposes, without realizing the tandem and the balance that is required for the earth to function to its capacity, that balances climatic issues, that balances environmental concerns, and provides us protein and food on a day-to-day basis. So I think, I would like to thank you for your quick this thing. We're sorry that we knew that you had serious court matters that you were chasing, but thank you for joining us in the midst of all that. And I would like to just bring in, is Makoma here? Otherwise, I could hand over to Nadine for Nadine to be bringing in some of these discussion pointers, because we had decided that we will do a quick discussion. We are already winding up time. We are already 6 minutes late by that standard, but we felt it was very important to hear from different people here. We also have a conference statement that Nadine will be reading out. Since I can't find Makoma here, I will hand over to Nadine. Once again, thank you for this opportunity to be here in the conference and to be facilitating the discussions. I'm truly honored and enlightened by the debate. Thank you all the special guests. Nadine, a word of this thing. Makoma has just joined, I believe. So we could just be giving her 5 minutes space because she was in the midst of an anti-nuclear hearing that is happening in South Africa. So she had requested that she be brought in anytime, but Makoma, if you can hear us, could you just keep your video on? So, because we have already heard from Vandana and some of the others, Liam Campbell and Vandana both reflected on the way forward. Thank you, Makoma, for joining us. We know that you and Lizzie, all of you are caught up in this process that's going on about the nuclear project that's being revived in South Africa. Our solidarity with your efforts. Makoma, we wanted to quickly hear from you as to what you think are important way forwards. You were part of the tribunal. You were part of the first tribunal in Sri Lanka. If you could just reflect on that, but also give your general observations. We are already running a little late, but we definitely want to hear you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I must apologize. Though I think my colleague Liz has also made you aware of the dilemma that we're facing, that we are up against the mineral energy complex, particularly the pro-nukes in the country. One is, I was part of the tribunal, and I think these tribunals are playing a particular role in giving people voices so that no voice is left behind in people determining what they want. One of the things that came out of the tribunals is that people were able to say, this is the problem that we're facing, this is what is happening. And then they continue to say, this is what we want to see happening. But one thing that was common along all the presentations that were made at the tribunal was the system of, or the economic system or the market-related system that people are faced with. People were living much more communally. They were sharing amongst themselves from the presentations, and it was not like people have got to go to big markets or whatever. It was much more of sustainable living, sustainable sharing, and also I think one way of demystifying what is called growth in Western levels. People were growing amongst themselves, and they were doing that sustainably. And in regards to the blue economy, which is kind of gold also, or the current gold or gold of the next century, this is the livelihoods of our people that are being disrupted by multinational corporations, by grass drilling within the oceans, and denying people of their livelihoods. I think for now, I would want to end there, but I would want to say that we should not allow multinational corporations to own our seas. We should not allow multinational corporations to disrupt our way of life and bring in a different lifestyle that is not sustainable, that is also not based on what we term as growth. Growth for us, it's living together, sharing amongst themselves, and growing together rather than having one person getting rich. Thank you.
Thank you, Makoma. And I think like the last General Assembly of the World Forum of Fisher People did give in the slogan of we belong to the oceans. And I think not that the oceans belong to us. And that's very much within the spirit of the Seattle Chiefs letter. And that I think continues to be the foundation of this battle against the corporate greed that is eating up the whole world and the oceans together. The battle is is an ongoing one. It probably not in our generation, but in the generations to come. This is a very, very important battle. Thank you for leading it globally, Makoma. Some of you women leaders are iconic of this battle, and I'm very, very happy and grateful that some of you be it Nadine, be it you, be it Vandana, be it Jesu, some of our top leaders who have pushed us, who have got us into engaging into this, are women leaders, and I think that is also showing a new trend in resistance that are led by women comrades. Thank you very, very much, Makoma, for joining us. Over to you, Nadine, and thank you very much.
Right. So very much thank you to everyone. I won't say much thank you because we're not at the end. We are at a second part where we are going to open up for discussions from our members. But it has really, really been very interesting. As you know, I live and I work in Belize. I represent the Caribbean, and we have a small delegation here on the call, and we have been following closely in a separate chat the conversation. So we want to say that your word has been spread from the Indian Ocean all the way to the Caribbean Sea and the entire world. We have Africa, we have all our members here, Brazil, Honduras, we have a whole large number. So we want to ask now these people, our friends, if you have anything you'd like to share. I will be facilitating this session, so I would ask if you can kindly raise your hand so that I can see. And I know we have other groups. So this is the big group, but we have other groups of Zoom listening because of the other language. So if the interpreter could raise hand from the other groups, we would like to hear from you at this point. So I will check now for your hands. Just in case I'm not seeing any hand, jump in, please. I don't think I see a hand. Jump in if you have any comments or questions for any of the jury members or any of the team.
Ivan, eu não estou conseguindo me conectar, eu não estou conseguindo levantar, fazer minha inscrição. Por favor,
a gente escuta você, Jusana.
Nadine.
So Jusana is asking for the floor.
Okay, Jusana, go ahead.
Jusana, pode falar.
Então, eu ouvindo atentamente assim a explicação, a apresentação de cada uma, todas apresentações muito ricas que assim nos engrandece e faz com que nós compreendemos cada vez mais a importância de conhecer para poder nos unir e fazer a luta. A questão da economia azul é algo assim muito, é um assunto que deixa a gente assim muito perplexo, porque haja visto em alguns momentos alguns achando que a economia azul é a solução para os problemas. E nós, no nosso entendimento assim de pescadoras e pescadores de pequena escala, nós compreendemos que hoje a apresentação de vocês nos tira muitas dúvidas em relação a essa economia azul. Então, assim, principalmente assim, na fala da doutora Vandana, assim, que faz uma explicação que tira todas e que deixa uma explicação assim, muito rica. Claro que de todas é uma explicação muito boa, a apresentação muito rica. Mas, assim, aqui no Brasil, a exemplo de muitos outros países, nós estamos vivenciando momentos assim da exploração através dessas formas de economia que, para nós, a gente sempre pergunta, essa economia é para quê e para quem? Porque para os pescadores de pequena escala é que não tem sido. né? Então, tipo exemplo da pesca de arrasto, que tem acontecido no litoral brasileiro e que tem tirado o espaço dos pescadores artesanais e que tem trazido conflito, tem trazido diminuição da produção, né? Então, esse enriquecimento, ele só é bom para aqueles que estão explorando. No caso, para nós, pescadores artesanais, isso não é bom, e para a população que depende diretamente, ou seja, esse processo é uma forma de devastar o meio ambiente, é de devastar a vida e é de trazer morte e destruição. Em um outro momento, eu gostaria de fazer, assim, já desde já, eu peço para os nossos companheiros intérpretes que nos ajudam nessa transmissão e fazem com que nós compreendemos cada vez mais esse assunto, é de que no WFFP, juntamente com outros fóruns, nós vamos precisar fazer algo para formular denúncias em relação a essas formas de exploração. É claro que a gente já vem fazendo alguma coisa, mas a gente precisa fazer alguma coisa também em relação à situação que vem acontecendo no Brasil, né? E me solidarizo com todos os companheiros e as companheiras que estão vivenciando esse momento em outros países do mundo, né? É que nós sabemos que essa situação ela não acontece apenas no Brasil, mas acontece em todos os países aí, como vocês já colocaram, tipo exemplo de Bangladesh e de outros países da Índia, né, que tem sofrido essa situação, esses ataques. Então, é isso, muito obrigada, era mais para fazer mesmo esse comentário, muito obrigado, e é isso, parabéns a todos e a todas.
Very good for your intervention, Josana. We appreciate your comment. So I am going to ask if we can look on a way forward. Can we open a discussion now on a way forward? How can we resist the blue economy? I see Kiki Kate. Kate, is that Kate from TNI? Or Kate, do you want to please make your comment loud?
Kate from Sustainable Development Foundation, Thailand. Kate is from Thailand.
Okay, Kate from Thailand.
Hello? Yes. Kate พูดหน่อยสิเดี๋ยวพี่แปลให้ She said that we need solidarity. We need to have a strong network, global network, and we have to really, upgrade from existing network and then make it as the common issue to further create the change. So that is what she said. Thank you.
Thank you, Ravadi from Thailand. That is from one of the Thai fishers. Is that directly from Kate or another fisher from Thailand?
From Kesini, from Kesini.
Okay, thanks for that intervention, Kesini. Okay, so Herman was the lead contact in Sri Lanka. Can I call on you, Herman?
Okay. Thank you, Nadine. I think this is a really great opportunity for all of us, the fishers, the fish worker organizations, the trade unions working with the communities. So this is a very informative and also very powerful opportunity. So because we can see how diverse group in this webinar. So we had very wider representation here, And also we had very deep understanding. We were able to go into deep understanding about the blue economy and how it affects the communities, and the importance is what we are going to do next. One thing, though we are working as the like-minded groups here, we need to think how we communicate this into wider society. So how do we say that this is the situation of the fisher communities in the world today, at least in the Indian Ocean, in South Asia and Southeast Asia, but this is the common situation all over the world. But how do we communicate this into the major groups who are deciding over small-scale fishers and the fisher communities in the world, like FAO or maybe World Bank or any other groups working on food and food producing. So in that context, we need to strategize. How do we approach them? How do we make sure that our voice is heard there? So in that context, I would like to say that we need to organize something with them, a dialogue or debate with them to say, this is our position and we don't want to go beyond that. And very particularly, next year will be the year of international small-scale fishers and aquaculture. So from now onwards, we need to focus that, and we'll work on that to highlight our issues in that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Herman. I will call on Ravadi Bak again. She has her hand raised.
So I translate from one of the participants here. She said that we need to act at different level. At the community level, we should, if we think that blue economy is destructing our way of life, so the change has to come from ourselves, that we have to continue resisting, not to allow the private sector and the government to make a control of our life. We have to exercise, we have to networking. And at the international level, it is also a need that we have to identify in what forum that we're going to make a collective plan. And the WFFP, the WFF, and other international network that we have already connect ourselves, we need to have a forum to discuss what should be a significant space that we have to advocate our point, and then to make them act to support our position in order for us to continue access and control and participate in this decision making of the ecosystem in our particular community. So I think that is from one of the participants from Thailand. Thank you.
Thank you, Ravadi. I will call on Moises Honduras, co-chair of WFFP. Please.
Buenos días a todas, a todos, buenas tardes, buenas noches. Digo esto porque con la compañera Nadine nos tocó despertarnos como a las 3 de la mañana, horario de Belice y Honduras, y estamos porque sí teníamos interés en participar, conocer más, aprender. Bueno, decirles que en efecto este tema de la economía azul nos está dejando sin alimentos, nos está dejando sin trabajo, nos está dejando sin recursos económicos, y también nos está poniendo en riesgo porque está permitiendo que se estén dando las migraciones de nuestros pescadores y sus familias. En el caso de Centroamérica y en el caso particular de Honduras, mucha gente está yendo a Estados Unidos a buscar mejores fuentes de ingresos alimenticios para sus familias. Otros están yendo también a Europa, buscan España sobre todo. Y como decía la compañera Rabadí, necesitamos mantener un poco más las alianzas estratégicas, mantener esos lazos de comunicación, armonía, pero también mantener esa unidad y participar en todos los eventos, articularnos más con los diferentes foros que hay en el caso con el tema de los indígenas, el tema de los campesinos, los 2 foros de pesca y otras articulaciones ambientales, porque en efecto nos estamos ya quedando sin comida, nos estamos quedando sin peces, y las transnacionales que forman parte de esta economía azul y las grandes empresas no les está importando lo que nosotros estamos sintiendo y lo que estamos viviendo. Entonces, sí, verdaderamente debemos mantener un poquito más esa unidad, esos convenios, esa información como la que nos están dando ahora, que es una herramienta súper importante para nosotros, porque manteniéndonos informados es como vamos a ir dando los pasos para hacerle frente a este flagelo y fenómeno que estamos viviendo. Muchas gracias.
Nadine, you're on mute.
Yes, I know Christiana had to leave, otherwise she would have gotten the floor at this moment. She was having power issues with her device. I don't see any other hands, but I want to check with our other rooms to ensure that we don't have any comments from our members in the other parts of Asia and the different rooms that were created. I'll just give a couple seconds there. I'm checking for hands. Russia, can we find out if there is any comment from Russia? In the Russia room, I know we have different time zones. People are waking up and people are falling asleep, but I think when I was scrolling down, I saw a friend, I will say a friend because she's a Belizean by nationality and birth. So I see Miss Imani Fairweather, I guess an observer, and want to welcome you. And we have much more. I didn't want to call names because I don't want to miss, but she's a Belizean. So I am.
Thanks for the invitation and for the really rich conversations. I learned a lot, and I look forward to the follow-up activities, and look forward to ways in which we can be of support to your endeavors. So thank you for including Oak in the release of your website and for the sharing the findings of the tribunal. Incredibly powerful stuff. Truly humbled and appreciative of the invite to be involved. Thank you.
Oh, hi, Miss Imani. So I know Miss Imani from Belize, so I just called on her knowing that she would not reject the call. But I still want to ask before we move on, we have a few more minutes. If we have anybody from our Russia members who want to make a comment. Okay, I don't hear anything. Just quickly stop me if there is a comment. I see other partners, and if they want to make any statement at this moment, please, I want to invite you to say a few words. I am looking at maybe TNI, Bread for the World. We saw ICSF. I don't know, ECSRNet. I know they have confirmed a big delegation and they were here. Members have been falling out, but I am calling on any partner or ally to say anything, Nasik. We still have a few more minutes for this part of the conversation. I will mute and you can jump in. And if you can put on your video, that would be fine too. Carson, I will start with you. Oh, Dexter. Dexter is from the Caribbean. We, like I said, we have a big delegation. We have Grenada. Dexter, go ahead.
Good morning, Nadine. Thanks for the invitation, to be part of this forum. The discussion was very healthy, and it shows that, you know, the issues that the fishers and farmers face within, you know, the Asian community, the same issues that we face here in the Caribbean. And when we look at, you know, the impact of the blue economy on coastal communities within the Caribbean, we see that, you know,
I apologize. I'm afraid, just so you know, that you cannot be interpreted. The quality of the audio is insufficient for interpretation. We apologize for this. Perhaps, sir, you could try using headsets, see if we can hear you better, and maybe turn off your camera, see if your internet connection would be better then.
are you hearing me now?
I'm afraid it is not much better. I apologize. If you wanted to write a message in the chat, we'd be happy. Perhaps Nadine could read it out, and the interpreters could then transmit it in the various languages.
Yes, so I was calling on TNI. I don't know if we have more than one person at this moment, but I'm sure we have Karsten. They have been a very, very strong supporting organization of the movement, and I would like to give a space since we have a few more minutes.
Thank you, Nadine. It is, as always, an honor to be able to support the movements. A lot has been said. I think there's not really much from my side to add. Only thing should be that what really strikes me is the scale of the onslaught on nature and people in Asia under the blue economy banner. I mean, many of us have worked on blue economy issues for many years now, but this scale that's being explained by all the jury members is I think, really striking. And then I know that I have a colleague, Britt, if she's participating in the meeting still. Britt has a lot of experiences with people's tribunals, other places in the world, including South Africa. I think it would be good if she is able to share a reflection or two. Thanks, Nadine, thanks everyone.
Right, so she can jump in now. I don't see her. So I will have one final person. If there's any person that wishes to speak, I will give that space, and then we're going to wind down and commence this call. So
Nadine, don't know if you can see me or hear me.
Yes, Nassim, you're the one. You're the one.
I'm not the one. I think it is clear from everything we have seen and heard that the blue economy is not the friend of the blue economy is not the friend of fisher community. Maybe I must just switch that off. Okay, so there's no, so there is no way that this whole drive for deepening and enhancing the blue economy can go without any kind of resistance, without any kind of opposition at national level and at global level. And it is important in a forum like that of the WFFP that we should take it on at global level. It is an issue that requires both mobilization at national level and mobilization at global level. So we kind of need to know in these kinds of spaces, who are the allies that we can find, who are the allies who can come in and support this rolling back, this pushing back or pushing forward the fight of fishers, and saying that those who support the blue economy are indeed enemies of fisherfolk, you know, and mobilization is needed. You know, it's a huge battle. It's a big affront that we are facing. And I know we all know that in the context of COVID, it has become a whole lot more difficult. But I mean, it is also a period in which the resolve of communities who are most affected are strengthened. And I think we take strength in the WFFP family and in the family of the allies we have here. We take strength from those who are on the same side. So all I'm saying that I think this has been a good event. This has been a good moment. It's a good space to share and to hear and to build solidarity. Because I think the one thing that I gathered from here is, even though within the WFFP and its friends, there's been a huge amount that we have gathered to get the ball rolling here, there's also a huge amount of people who have not been that close to the immediate struggles that we are facing, or people who are remotely close, if we can have that kind of phrase. This event has been a positive one. It has been good. So I take strength from it. I'm sure the rest of WFFP does, and I think people must not be affronted if next week or next month or next year we come knocking on your door again and we say, look, this is how far we got. We need more help. We need more team play. We need more solidarity. We need, you know, this kind of intervention in which you can provide extra strength. Then that's good. We, you know, expect us to come knocking on your door, and we hope you will keep your door open, or not keep it open. Open it when we call, because sometimes when the door is kept open, the wrong people come in. But it is when we come in that I think we need the support that we can. But this is importantly the kind of political intervention, the political pushback that we do need against the blue economy. So yeah, I was just sitting in the background, Nadine. I wasn't my space in the foreground of WFFP has long gone. But just say, you know, those are a few words for now.
Thank you. I will quickly scroll down and I will bring this session to an end. We had very good presentations by our jury members and useful discussion at the end. So thank you, each and every one of you, for participating. At this moment, I will read the statement that brings and ties together everything that was said, and the statement is one between the WFFP and our participating members in the Indian Ocean and the Tribunal. We, the World Forum of Fisher Peoples, representing 30 million fisher peoples from 56 countries, denounce the blue economy as promoted by our government, governmental institutions, transnational corporations, and transnational environmental NGOs. We call upon our sisters and brothers from all segments of our society to stand by our side in our struggle against the capitalist onslaught on our nature and climate, and to reclaim what has been taken from us in
Niggers.
Okay, so we're going to exclude from the meeting whoever's opening their microphone. James Carlson, it looks like it's you. So unless if your microphone ever opens again, you will be thrown out of the meeting immediately. If someone knows this person and can vouch for them, please come up. Otherwise, I will gladly expel them. Nadine, you are silenced.
Am I good? I was thanking you, Emily, for that. I continue.
Тебе тяжело идти, значит, ты жирный.
Please take out these people.
Silence everyone, and people will not be able to open their microphones themselves. I'm sorry. No, ask all to mute, pardon.
And we take out James?
Oh, you.
No one knows this person? Okay, he's gone. Okay, we don't deal with fascists here. Thank you so much. Okay, normally people shouldn't be able to unmute themselves, so I will now unmute interpreters one by one. I apologize. Or actually, maybe now I should allow people to unmute themselves. Go ahead.
And we do not admit more people into the room now.
Okay.
I see many people who want to enter the room, but
oh, see, there's new messages. Okay, you're out. I hope I'm not excluding a Russian member that needs to be here, but I cannot speak enough Russian to know which is which.
What a bad language, some of these people.
Yeah, we get this all the time in feminists events. You have no idea the violence we receive. Okay, hopefully we can continue.
Emily, is it safe now to speak?
Well,
I hope so, my dear.
I don't know if you can be, but can I ask you to close the chat? It's sickening to see that language in the chat. I don't know how possible it is.
I'm working on that as well. We're not letting new people in if we still have some people in the call. We'll just throw them out, and then we can continue.
We cannot tell who is doing that, I'm afraid. Nikto?
Please remove the permission of unmuting everyone, and you can make interpreters as co-host. It will help.
Okay, I will do that. Thank you for your advice. Sorry, it's not easy to manage. Allora.
Shut the fuck up.
Would you have the courage to say this in anyone's face?
Fuck you.
Monica.
Okay, so everyone is muted and I'm making interpreters co-host. I apologize for the delay. Karsten, can you help me with this?
What do I have making
Interpreters co-hosts?
interpreters co-host? For some reason, I can't make people co-hosts anymore. This is weird. Well, on the positive side, Nadine, it's good this only happened in the very end of the meeting. So, and this is a risk of having inclusive and open meetings where we can all see each other and be together. I mean, we had this discussion in the entire planning process, and I mean, it is important also to strengthen solidarity across to have open meetings instead of conference meetings where people cannot see who is participating. So it was a deliberate choice, and I think it was the right choice. And these kind of things happens quite often. So just an unfortunate 5-minute delay. Fascist and racist are unfortunately everywhere, and now they entered our room, but it's not going to change our spirit.
The interpreters who are not yet co-hosts, please send me a private message. And also there are people asking for the floor. There is Hassan Juma, I don't know whether we know them, Christian D. And if we don't know them, I'm afraid that...
I don't know, I don't think so.
Okay. So any of the interpreters still need help? So Christian D is saying they want to help. Well, you can write a private chat and your message will be read out. I'm afraid we're not take a chance unless someone here can vouch for you. Interpreters, are we all good? Okay, so I think we're ready, Nadine. Terribly sorry.
Nadine's mic should be...
unmute you. Go ahead, Nadine, you should be able now.
Whew, thank you. So I will start and I will read even louder for those in the back who wants to hear. Let's start. The People's Tribunal that exposed the blue myth. We, the World Forum of Fisher Peoples, representing 30 million fisher peoples.
Hold on, Nadine, I apologize. Some of the interpreters didn't unmute and are just telling me now.
Good, go ahead.
Yes, which is why I ask you to please let me know. Who else? Rajan? Any other interpreters unable to open their microphone at this stage? Okay. Moses is saying he apologized, he has to leave. I'm now the only one receiving messages in the chat, it seems. There is a person I don't know who is saying they're an interpreter, so. I think you can go ahead, Nadine. I'm sorry, Frenis, Jan, if you're an interpreter, but we're not taking chances at this stage.
Right, good, good, Emily.
Yeah, you can go ahead. The meeting is locked, so let's go ahead, yeah.
Good, thanks, Anil. We, the World Forum of Fisher Peoples, representing 30 million fisher peoples from 56 countries, denounce the blue economy as promoted by our governments, multilateral institutions, transnational corporations, and transnational environmental NGOs. We call upon our sisters and brothers from all segments of our society to stand by our side in our struggle against the capitalist onslaught on our nature and climate, and to reclaim what has been taken from us in the name of blue development. The ocean is increasingly framed as a frontier of economic development, and the unprecedented capital investments are reshaping our coastal lands into infrastructure landscapes for the purpose of extracting profits. Millions of peoples, where we fisher peoples are only a fraction, are directly affected when our coasts are turned into ports, petroleum hubs, tourism sites, aquaculture projects, power plants, mining areas, and special economic zones. At the same time, the ocean is being carved up into and divided into zones for oil and gas drilling, shipping lanes, offshore wind farms, deep sea and sand mining areas, factory fishing, and marine protected areas. Under the guise of developing the blue economy, our fishing territories are grabbed to provide space for these so-called development projects. Now in 2018, some 20 fisher movements and allied civil society organizations from 6 Asian countries initiated first-time documentation of people's testimonials from over 50 communities affected by the Blue Economic Development projects. The series of 6 People's Tribunal conducted in 2020 brought a tide of worst fears to the fore. Some 600,000 people in Sri Lanka are affected by one port project, along with homes and beaches washed away, and 300,000 fishers without means to provide for their families. A large chunk of Maheshkhali Island in Bangladesh is being turned into a special economic zone with a new container port, thermal power projects, and liquefied natural gas infrastructures, and some 3.2 million people, many of who depend on the sea for their livelihoods, will be directly affected. In Thailand, the Grand Thai Canal connected the South China Sea and the Indian Ocean, and associated mega infrastructure project will cause havoc to both nature and millions of people. In Indonesia, the new Omnibus Law 2020 could lead to displacement of 8 million fisher households to provide space for infrastructure developments and tourism. In Wadhan Port Project in Maharashtra, it will affect some 10,000 fisherwomen, and this is just only one infrastructure in many under the Blue Revolution project of the Indian government. The People's Tribunal, with the verdicts of the juries, make up first ever proof of the scale of havoc unleashed in the name of blue economy. We as small-scale fishers remain excluded from decisions affecting our lives and territories. When protesting, we are increasingly met by militarized state repression. When exercising our traditional practices and human rights, we are confronted with dispository dynamics of capitalist development. At the same time, Gender inequality is being exasperated under the blue economy, and climate crisis is deepening. The testimonies have also shown that it is not only us fisher peoples whose lives and livelihoods are threatened. The blue economy reshapes entire coastlines, and it cuts deep into the hinterlands with pipelines, roads, and railways connecting to the seas. The myriad of blue infrastructure and tourism projects displace masses of people and turn us into army of cheap labor who have no choice but to accept the low wages and harsh working conditions in nearby and faraway labor markets. We live in times where the dominating capitalist development model affects us all, with the common characteristics of immense accumulation of wealth amongst a small minority, while the rest of us face increasingly brutal and precarious living conditions as the blue economy seeks to turn us into mere appendages of toe capital and capitalist interests. But together we are the majority, and together we can and will take control of our future. A future that aims for the protection of lives and our nature and climate, rather than one based on continued exploitation and extraction. We call upon our sisters and brothers, farmers and herders, dock workers and shipping crews, unions and migrants, factory workers and fishers, women and youth to join forces and stand united to make sure the last frontier, the ocean, becomes not a new frontier for capital, but a frontier for us in reshaping society for the benefit of the people and the planet. I want to thank each and every one of you for your time being offered to participate. All our partners, our members, and especially those who worked so hard on the ground and the support people that they had behind them to make this very possible. I am going to conclude this session, and we have done a full 4 hours. I have been in Delhi, and anything they organize is very big and elaborate. So even though we had only secured 2 hours, they had to double it. My apologies, but with much respect for your time, I will end now. Thank you, everyone.
Nadine, just a quick time for Anil to do a vote of thanks.
Yes.
Anil, kindly come on.
Dear friends, I will not take much time of yours, but just formally to say that our battle has not ended, it's just begun. Stating that this was also a learning process for many of us when it was initiated, especially through Jeswaka as well as Jeswaratnam as well as through Sneha initially. But the way they actually built it up by building a pool of actors who were actually associated with the fish workers movement across the region, indeed was a great learning experience, at least for us. That is how this whole collective of organizing committee was actually formed. So, on behalf of the organizing committee, we should actually extend our gratitude, especially in this very difficult times, to many people across the region, especially to World Forum of Fisher People. Apart from World Forum of Fisher People, there has been support groups within Indonesia, Thailand, Sri Lanka, and other countries. I'm not specifying each name, but we are extremely grateful to each one of them. Because before going inside the tribunal and things like that, there was a research. Most of the time, these were the organizations. It was NAFSO in Sri Lanka, Kiara in Thailand. Then you had Coast in Bangladesh. You had the National Fishworkers Forum in India, and apart from that, you had different facilitating organizations and coordinating organizations also. It was given much care to the research group actually, and before I forget, even SDF in Thailand. Thank you, Vijayan, for mentioning that. The research group, wherever they went, they're taken care of. The fisher workers movements, fisher worker groups actually held them together, gave time to actually respond to their questions and tell what are the issues happening in the respective regions. On behalf of the organizing committee, we are grateful to all the ground groups who have been part of this initiative. And from where we actually want to move forward, there are different individuals who have been behind the curtains. Especially, we are thankful to all the translators, all the friends who had actually who helped in finalizing the jury verdicts. There were a lot of people who were documenting the whole process and making it available at the right point of time. Um, the extremely thankful to all jury members, and it was very kind of them. Even apart from the jury, during that period, they also made time to come for the validation point. Today, this is the seventh meeting in the series. They made a point to come in and give their thought processes to it and extend their solidarity also. We are very thankful to all the jury members, all the speakers. We hope and we hope that this interaction will not
Nous
be an end in
espérons que
itself during this
cette
process,
interaction...
and
Pardon.
we can actually move forward.
Apologies.
Oh, it's okay, Bli. We can move forward by taking this one to other areas also. We would be more than happy to be of assistance in any level. But there is the way, as many speakers also said, that this is going to be a very soon shift which is coming in. How can we resist this onslaught is another thing which we'll have to think through and perhaps develop new strategies. We hope that this initiative will be a starting moment once again, and also be a catalyst also to the fish workers movements across the country, and also build solidarity across the globe. Thanks a lot once again, and it's over to you, Vijay.
Nothing else from my side. Thank you was the last word. Indeed, thank you everybody for being here. As Anil said, it was a great opportunity for all of us. Not repeating anything what he said, but I think there is great
On n'a
content
rien enlevé à ce qui a
as
été
we go
dit.
forward. I think we have also managed to build a team of people around this work, and we thank all of you, each and every person who has been associated with this process. Yeah, it's over and out. It's a good evening. And thank you, Nadine, for that dig. That was a nice one. In India, we do longer meetings. The message loud and clear. Yeah, but I think we have done better than the tribunals themselves, because I remember in the first Sri Lanka tribunal, we had listed it for a 4.5-hour session, and it ended up becoming almost a 6-hour tribunal. And actually, kudos to the jury members who actually stayed on and made sure that they were the ones who were keen to hear more from, because in Sri Lanka, they had organized almost 6 locations, 3 in South Sri Lanka and 3 in the northern region of the country, where they could bring together people. So it is really a great opportunity to have been part of this this effort. Thank you, Jesu and the Sneha team, Gandhimati and other friends, the research team, and also all the facilitating organizations. I think not just in India or in Asia, we got support from across the world. Some of the resource partners like Sweet Bio or CCFD, and some of them who facilitated the process. In India, it was facilitated by the Henry Boll Foundation and Misery EV. So all of them have actually been very, very helpful in understanding and taking forward this process. I think globally, we need to replicate this, is the message that is going. The movement needs to be strengthened at a time of catastrophic impacts that are being unleashed by commercial corporate world on the environment and ecology. So I think that message is loud and clear. It's over and out from the conference organizing team. Thank you all very much. Nadine, fantastic job once again of keeping things together. And Nazik, Karsten, Emily, all the friends who have been involved in making this possible. goodbye from India, and thank you very much. See you all soon.
Yeah.
Some people in the chat are asking if we take a photo.
Yeah, screenshot.
Several people thanking the organizers, thanking Nadine, thanking the interpreters.
For photos, we need everyone to switch on the videos. Nadine, why are you? You didn't run away, did you? I'm working from an other PC here, so I cannot make a print screen. So Jisoo, Emily.
I don't know how to.
Yeah, I just made a screen print, but there are very few people with their cameras on. So we have one page.
Yeah.
And it's done. I'll send it to you now.
Excellent.
That we could do.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for a really interesting and long session. So
Yes.
great. And to all the interpreters, I think you deserve a drink.